Hogwarts, both scientific and magical. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, Logical and Rigorous Plot Reasoning. 1991, Hogwarts Great Hall. Opening ceremony. Kyle Shafiq sat at the long table in Slytherin, watching the annual sorting ceremony being performed again. As Gryffindor shouted that we had a Potter, he could not help but recall the bitterness and glory of the past. There was a time in his previous life when the acknowledgement section of a doctor's thesis became popular on the internet. I have come a long way and suffered a lot to send this doctoral thesis to you. 22 years of studying, all the way through wind and rain, many difficulties. For Kyle, this is not a healing article, but a portrayal of him. Born in an orphanage, he ranked first all the way and was finally admitted to University. After graduating from his master's degree, he refused to worry. If Xiaomi gave me the endorsement fee, this can be changed to Xiaomi, and resolutely started his own business. Unlike the doctor, who was in the mud and had a bright heart, the life in the orphanage made Kyle learn to fight at a very young age, learn to read people's faces, and learn to do whatever it takes for a better life. With his inner strength, technology and creativity, and connections accumulated at University, the company's valuation reached $1.5 billion at the age of 35. Kyle, who finally reached the peak of his life, was defeated by a cancer notice. Lung cancer late stage. The sharp and dark means pushed away his former friends. When he was in the most painful time, there was no one to talk to. In the end, he ended up with a half-life and a sloppy exit. Kyle sold the company's shares and entrusted his best friend and partner to establish a foundation for caring for orphans. With a calm heart, he embarked on a journey, the sea, the desert, domestically, and abroad, and finally stopped in London. Finally, he couldn't hold on and had to be admitted to the hospital. At the last moment of consciousness, he vaguely recognized the building outside the window, which seemed to be King's Cross Station. Fate played a joke on Kyle. When he regained consciousness, he was already lying in a 4-person dormitory decorated with dark green and snake-shaped carvings everywhere. Kyle, who hadn't slept all night, finally figured out his identity, a freshman at a magic school. Just when Kyle was ready to study step by step, improve himself step by step through the golden finger, and enjoy a new life, he was slapped in the face by fate again. Kyle's college seems to be a college that worships pure blood. The name of the college is Slytherin. Because the college logo is a snake, it is also called the Snake Court. Although the leader of the pure blood died a few years ago, the idea of pure blood supremacy permeates the entire college. Kyle is an orphan from an orphanage with an unknown origin under the name of Shafiq. The ensuing school violence and bullying, these imaginable darkness once again enveloped Kyle. If it were an ordinary person, he might be tortured and drop out of school automatically. Unfortunately, this is Kyle who went against the current all the way in his previous life, fighting against the sky, fighting against people, and brazenly challenging fate. If someone hit him with a punch, Kyle would definitely kick him back. 3 or 5 people besieged him. Even if he couldn't beat him at the time, he would definitely retaliate one by one afterwards. If you can beat him, beat him. If you can't beat him, write it down in a small notebook and beat him again when you have a chance in the future. Other people's dormitories were in the cellar, while Kyle's was in the hospital wing. The staff member he was most familiar with in the whole school was Madame Pomfrey. Gradually, everyone knew that this kid was not easy to mess with. He was the kind of ruthless person who would splash your blood, even if he couldn't bite off a piece of your flesh. As he learned more and more spells, the combination of soul and body became better and better, and Kyle's strength became stronger and stronger. The names on the small notebook were getting fewer and fewer. In the 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and 4th grade, all the little snakes who bullied Kyle at that time were not spared. Every time he retaliated against one, he crossed one out. Finally, in the 3rd grade, Kyle became the uncrowned king of Slytherin. He no longer had any enemies when he looked around, because the proud and excellent Slytherin little snakes were all beaten into friends by him. Let's get back to the present. Kyle had never read Harry Potter in his previous life, but only heard from his roommate that it was a fairy tale. It seemed to be a story about a warrior breaking through the barriers and finally defeating the devil and living happily with a princess. It gave Kyle a feeling similar to Super Mario. After nearly 3 years of hard recall, Kyle roughly pieced together the main plot of the storybook. There are 7 novels in the previous life, which should correspond to Harry Potter's 7 school years at Hogwarts, starting from school and finally defeating the Dark Lord in the 7th grade. I vaguely remember that there was a little girl in the trio, and that little girl should be the protagonist's final wife. According to Super Mario's thinking, this little girl will be captured by the boss, but she can choose the right time to remind Potter and do a favor. I remember that the novel said that the Dark Lord has 7 Horcruxes, and each time a Dark Lord's health bar is destroyed, it will be reduced by 1. It seems that 1 is destroyed every year, and finally there will be a decisive battle with the Dark Lord. Judging from the name, the first one is called Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, so the first Horcrux should be the Sorcerer's Stone. The Goblet of Fire and the Deathly Hallows, Resurrection Stone, Elder Wand and Invisibility Cloak can be clearly seen later, plus the Dark Lord snake that seems to be called the Chronicles of Narnia, which makes a total of 6. It is said that there is another one on Potter, a total of 7, complete. This result was obtained by Kyle after repeated deliberation for a long time, no problem. Of course Kyle would not get involved in Potter's warrior game, but of course he would not mind getting a Horcrux to study. Kyle planned to observe the extraordinary qualities of the protagonists this year, while asking what special things Potter had. According to Kyle's guess, the Horcrux that his roommate said was on Potter should be something passed down from his ancestors or parents, or a magical artifact that he got by accident. The scar on Potter's head that his roommate said was on him could not be laughing. Of course, Kyle also warned himself that the plot had begun, and the dangers that accompanied the protagonist also began to appear. He could no longer live like he did in previous years after a month. After traveling through these years, Kyle certainly knew how big the difference between a real world and a fairy tale was. It can only be said that J.K. Rowling is a guy who is only worthy of publishing fairy tales on StoryKing. What does he know about the magic world? Chapter 2 Chief. Following the prefects, we walked through the staircase that was always moving randomly and came to the cellar lounge that belonged exclusively to Slytherin. Remember, the password is pure blood. The password changes every 2 weeks. I don't want any freshmen to be so stupid as to forget the password and ask me to pick someone up at the door of the lounge. The prefect said to all the first year students and then led them through the portraits to the common room at the bottom of the lake. The Slytherin lounge is a long narrow low basement with rough stone walls and ceilings. The basement is circular and the top is also an arch with exquisite murals carved on it, telling the history of the founding of Slytherin College. Some green lights are hung on the ceiling by chains. In the middle of the 2 staircase entrances not far apart is a curved fireplace with exquisitely carved silver snakes surrounding it. Above the fireplace is a silver green wall clock, with the snake head as the hour hand and the snake tail as the minute hand, showing 8 o'clock and 7 minutes, and some carved chairs next to it. The blank walls were hung with portraits of past Slytherin deans, and the overall environment was a little gloomy and depressing. The first year students stood in the middle of the lounge, and the other seniors stood around, waiting for the dean's lecture. This was a 1,000-year-old tradition of Slytherin. Sure enough, it didn't take long before the black robe rolled in front of everyone. Severus Snape glanced at his new students, and successfully made them feel his majesty. I don't ask you to do anything for Slytherin, but you must remember that you are Slytherin. Think about why you chose Slytherin, or were chosen here. Snape's silky voice sounded, knocking his words into their hearts. You know the characteristics of Slytherin, and you also know the situation of Slytherin in school. If you are smarter than the troll, you should move the thing on your neck before doing anything. If you want to do something that I must deduct your own college points, please think clearly whether you can bear the anger of the entire Slytherin. After saying that, he turned around and left with his black robe rolling, leaving the first year Snake trembling with fear. Kyle was undoubtedly grateful to Professor Snape. It can be said that as the dean, Professor Snape has been protecting Kyle since the first year. The anger of parents outside the school and the dissatisfaction of seniors in the school were all borne by this dean. Although he didn't say it, Kyle's respect for the professor was unquestionable. Next, the prefect announced the rules of Slytherin. Slytherin is different from other colleges. In addition to the prefects designated by the school, each grade has a head of grade. You must fight for your own position in the college, and the head of grade is the leader of the collective actions of the college outside. Generally speaking, it is the head of the 7th grade, but second year students and above can challenge. The conditions required for the head of Slytherin are family power and personal strength. If the family has no power, then you can have power yourself. It is undeniable that influence on society is also a quality that a head must possess. The prefect glanced at a few half-bloods with a look of injustice on their faces with a warning, and then continued, among your first years, the ones with the most family power are Malfoy, Zabini and Parkinson. Next is your own strength. On the first day of school every year, there is a one-on-one challenge system. The head of the first grade must be determined before midnight. The prefect left first, after he finished speaking, and several combative first years were already eager to try throwing spells at each other. Most of the 4th year snakes returned to the dormitory, leaving only a few to watch the fun, and clearly stated that Kyle was the chief. After 3 years of friendly exchanges, Kyle had been completely accepted by Slytherin, just as the sorting hat said, maybe you will enter Slytherin, maybe you will make sincere friends here, but those cunning and insidious people will do whatever it takes to achieve their goals. For these insidious but ambitious snakes, a powerful friend will only bring glory to themselves, and bring more benefits to themselves, so how could they reject him? Kyle stood aside and took a look at the fuss between the first years, and then he kept paying attention to the other small circles. It must be admitted that no matter whether Slytherin is arrogant and insidious, the snake's pursuit of power is above the other 3 colleges. In the battle between the seniors, black magic emerged in an endless stream, and both sides of the battle had obviously undergone rigorous training, and there was no confusion in their steps when they moved around. When the snakehead crawled to the middle of 11 and 12, the heads of each grade had been selected. As expected, the head of the first grade was Draco Malfoy. Congratulations, Malfoy. A slightly low voice sounded. The head not only represents power, but also a heavy responsibility. The glory of Slytherin cannot be tarnished in any way. Erickson Parker, the head of the 7th grade, said, well, I believe that after a day of hard work, you all want to rest early. First year students, you can go back to the dormitory. Kyle, who was leaning against the stairs and witnessed the competition for the head, said, then turned around and walked to the dormitory first. Don't think that Kyle is taking over the job. This is a position he has fought for with his own strength. Chapter 3 spell. Right over there, look. Where? Next to the red-haired guy. The one with the glasses? Did you see his face? Did you see his scar? The next morning, Kyle heard all these whispers while eating in the auditorium. Groups of small animals walked back and forth in front of Potter's seat, and all pretended to be passing by. Kyle was too tired to complain. There were 5 or 6 children who had passed by Potter more than 10 times, and they were all passing by unintentionally. Ignoring the disturbances in the school, Kyle began his own learning journey. To be honest, Kyle put all his energy into improving his practical ability in the first 3 years, and used boring practice to build up his current strength. The result was that Kyle's foundation was seriously insufficient and his research on magic theory was seriously lagging behind. Of course, this is actually the normal situation for young wizards. Only wizards who are engaged in research in related fields after graduation will delve into magic theory and study the internal connection and composition principles between spells. But for Kyle, this was unbearable. Appreciating the splendor of magic was something that countless people in their previous lives yearned for, but could not get. After traveling through time once, how could Kyle just stop at a superficial taste and know the result, but not the reason? With Professor Flitwick's announcement at the end of class, the little snakes and the Ravenclaw eagles who were in the same class filed out. Kyle, who was left at the end, walked towards the professor. The little snakes of the same grade looked back and left silently. Child, what's the matter? Professor Flitwick said with a smile. In fact, Kyle knew that some professors in the school were wary of him. After all, his image of pursuing strength was too deeply rooted in people's hearts, and even some professors should know his black magic. It is normal for Slytherin students to learn black magic, but it is generally relatively simple cutting spells, while Kyle's mastery can be described as mysterious. But this view is being improved, especially the professors of the 3 courses of spells, ancient runes, and alchemy. Since the 3rd grade holiday, Kyle has always maintained close contact with them. Professor, let's talk about the flying spell I discussed with you before. I did find the ancient flying spell in the ancient magic encyclopedia you recommended, and did some research on it. There is no doubt that there is a connection between the ancient flying spell and the modern flying spell, but Professor, I don't understand why there is such a big difference between the two. The modern flying spell emphasizes speed, while the ancient flying spell emphasizes stability and duration. What's more amazing is that the magic rune structure of the two is almost exactly the same. Kyle said in disbelief. Calm down, Kyle, calm down. Professor Flitwick waved his hand and motioned Kyle to sit down, and he also sat in the front row seat. Kyle, I'm glad that you can seriously study the boring and uninteresting things such as the magic rune structure. To be honest, this is a bit beyond my expectation. I believe you have realized that magic is not just chanting spells and waving wands. This is just its external manifestation. Spells and gestures are the external manifestations of magic, not the core. These are just to help beginners better guide the magic power, so as to release it and complete the magic. When you know enough about a spell and have enough ability to drive the magic, you can try to cast it silently. But knowing enough is really hard for most people. Professor Flitwick's expression became more and more pleasant. It was obvious that a student who studied the secrets of magic was quite appreciated by the professor. Then Professor, what does knowing enough mean? What is the relationship between this and the magic structure of the flying spell? You know, I did too little research in this area in the past few years, so I had to spend more time on applied magic. And through practice, I obviously did not reach the level of knowing enough you said, but I can still cast silently. Why is that? Has it become an instinct? Kyle already had a vague idea about this. After hearing the professor's summary, he really felt like he had suddenly understood something. But then, more questions popped up. Don't be impatient. The secrets of magic are endless. If you want to delve into it, you can't rush for quick success. You are right. Silent spells do not have to be studied thoroughly before they can be released. After unremitting practice, you can practice the magic power into your own instinct, and you can also do it. Kyle, as you said, the runes of the ancient flying spell and the modern flying spell are almost the same, because their main body is flying, and the difference is the control part of the magic. The ancient flying spell was mainly used to travel long distances. So except for the part that controls flight, the remaining control runes are more inclined to stability and duration. Use less magic power to obtain a longer flight distance. In modern times, due to the popularity of apparition, flu network and portkeys, flying is no longer used to travel. It is more used for short distance movement in places where apparition is not possible. So speed is more emphasized. If you want to study it in depth, it is better to compare the differences between the two spells. It can help you better understand the two spells. Thank you, Professor. I think I know what to study next. Kyle said thoughtfully. After leaving the spells classroom, Kyle plunged into the library. Professor Flitwick's theory confirmed Kyle's conjecture and also clarified Kyle's next research direction. Since he got a stable living environment in Slytherin, Kyle has started research in this area. Flying spells, flying brooms, magic carpets, these things that can cause flying effects. Kyle has studied them all. Even if the current knowledge reserves cannot study them thoroughly, he has a general understanding of their operating principles. The reason for studying these is due to Kyle's persistence in his previous life. Kyle's only and favorite entertainment in his previous life was to play D&D games such as Warcraft and Neverwinter. When he really crossed over to the magic world and stood firm, looking at the magic of the magic world, compared with the game world in his memory, he always felt that it lacked a legendary color, and more magic was applied to life. If the various equipment, artifacts, magic towers, and even floating cities in the game can be copied to this world, what kind of glory will they bloom? How can you not leave something behind when you visit the magical world? With this in mind, Kyle began his own research and had a preliminary idea for the construction of the floating city. Chapter 4 Floating City Hypothesis. The structure of the world's first car is extremely simple. An engine, ignition device, cooling device, transmission device, suspension, steering device, brake device, and body. There are only these few parts, and the structure of each part is very simple. For Kyle, the floating city is too far away from him, but he can still make a simple version of the plan. For the floating city itself, the most core part is of course floating, more specifically, flying and control. For this part, Kyle has two ideas. The first is to carve a large enough magic circle on the ground. After taking off, with the magic circle as a boundary, the part above the magic circle will float with the magic circle, and the line below the magic circle will remain in place. There are many difficulties in this plan. First, this requires Kyle to conduct a deep enough study of magic literature. He must infer a flying magic circle that can provide enough power and is stable. Second, the material for carving the magic circle is also not ordinary, and the material itself must contain magic power. It must be able to conduct magic power almost losslessly, and it must be stable enough to still exist even after 1,000 years, instead of being corroded by time. At present, all Kyle can think of is the blood of various magical animals, supplemented by various magical materials for blending. Thinking of this, Kyle couldn't help but think of Dumbledore's phoenix named Fawkes. First bleed Fawkes, then let Fawkes reborn, and then bleed again. Wouldn't it achieve the same effect as the endless descendants? I just feel that Dumbledore will not agree to do this. It's quite a pity. To think about it. 3. Workload. The magic circle is composed of countless magic runes, and each magic rune cannot exceed the size of a palm. The workload brought by this makes Kyle panic. 4. The most important part is the protection of the magic circle. Since the magic circle is at the bottom of the entire floating city, it means that the entire magic circle is directly exposed. At present, the method Kyle can think of is to draw a few more layers of magic circles under the floating city. This can effectively reduce the load of the magic circle and disperse the risk at the same time. Then add a metal shell to the floating city and completely wrap it up. In this way, not only the magic circle, but also the safety of the entire floating city has been raised by more than one level. Of course, the price is the rapid increase in cost and workload. The second floating method is to use alchemy to make a floating core. This is also the idea that Kyle came up with after he had a preliminary understanding of alchemy. Set the radiation range of the floating core to radiate downward and horizontally. In this way, the final result is that a bowl-shaped piece of land under the floating city will float up, and the ground above will not be affected. This method also has many disadvantages, the biggest of which is that it is very expensive. Alchemy is not just a saying that 3 generations of poverty. It is estimated that the materials that make up the floating core must be legendary. Mithril does not even have the status of drawing decorative patterns on the floating core. In addition to flying, the floating city should also have sufficient defense capabilities, excellent offensive capabilities, anti-interference capabilities between modules, high altitude oxygen supply, water resources that can provide life, and the most important, energy. You can't expect Kyle to raise thousands of house elves and use the elves to provide magic. In fact, Kyle also has a few ideas about energy. One is to capture Fawkes, let him release his magic, then achieve nirvana, and then release magic again, so that there will be endless descendants. Thinking of this, Kyle suddenly realized that he had built the first industrial chain for the floating city. First let Fawkes donate blood, then release magic, and finally achieve nirvana. The meat left after nirvana can be sold. Phoenix meat must be very valuable. However, after checking, it turns out that the Phoenix Nirvana will only leave ashes. But it doesn't matter. Phoenix ashes can be used as fertilizer to grow vegetables. Another industrial chain has emerged. But thinking about Dumbledore, it is not easy to convince him, and Fawkes is a little busy with the Phoenix, so he can only give up and put this idea aside for the time being. However, through Fawkes, Kyle thought about whether he could use biological transformation to to transform a creature with low intelligence, simple survival requirements, but able to produce magic as a biological magic source. For example, cows used to eat grass and produce milk. Now, can we use biological transformation to transform cows into eating grass and producing pure magic? Or go one step further and use biological means such as cloning to create organs that produce magic power, so that only a large enough nutrient pool is needed to obtain a steady supply of magic power. The second idea is to borrow power from heaven and earth. Through magic arrays, alchemy and other means, the free magic power between heaven and earth is stored and used to supply the floating city. This is not nonsense. Whether it is Hogwarts or the manors of various nobles, they are all protected by strict magic arrays, and the source of their energy supplies this energy storage room. By absorbing the magic power emitted by humans and magical creatures, and the free energy between heaven and earth, the magic array or spell function is used to make it last for thousands of years. But the disadvantage of this method is its low efficiency. At present, the means of the magic world are still too backward. The existing energy storage room is already the limit of supplying Hogwarts. If you want to expand the scope of function, the power of the energy storage room will not be able to keep up. The third idea, of course, is to target the most powerful energy supply facility in human history: nuclear power plant. A large nuclear power plant is enough to supply a city's industrial and agricultural electricity, and it is of course no problem to use it as the energy supply core of the floating city. But how to convert electrical energy into magic power, or directly convert nuclear energy into electrical energy, is a huge problem. At the same time, the source of nuclear power plants is also a problem. No country will build a nuclear power plant for an individual. Moreover, the service life of a nuclear power plant obviously cannot meet Kyle's expectation of not decaying for 1,000 years. Therefore, the nuclear power plant must be transformed, which involves the combination of technology and magic. It's a headache to think about it. After simply sorting out his ideas about the floating city, he estimated in his mind what he needed to study and the cost of building a floating city. Kyle set 2 directions for his future actions. 1. Research magic. The basis for the floating city to take off is to have sufficient magic theory support, and not only the existing magic, but also Kyle himself needs to innovate too. Money. Don't think it's vulgar. Think about the previous life. No matter which floating city in the game, it takes the whole country's strength, or empties the savings of a legendary wizard for hundreds of years, to take off. Thinking of this, Kyle really wants a phoenix. Chapter 5: Severus Snape. After dinner, Kyle continued to study hard in the library. The 1,000-year-old foundation of Hogwarts is indeed unfathomable. The huge library is full of knowledge waiting for Kyle to discover. Flying is the dream of mankind since ancient times, and Kyle started from this point, first studying the flying spell, then using the output to exchange for funds, and then using the funds obtained to promote his research. Only by falling into a virtuous circle can you avoid bankruptcy. In addition to the flying spell discussed with Professor Flitwick, Kyle is also studying the floating spell, the flying spell, the magic runes used in the flying broom, etc., including some magic spells related to flying, found in the library. Through comparison, Kyle has basically figured out the basic magic runes of flying and the control unit. What Kyle needs to do now is to find a way to connect them in series with a magic circle and make the effect of the series connection be 1 + 1 greater than 2, rather than 1 + 1 less than 1, which is the most difficult. In a magic circle, in addition to the main magic runes that achieve the purpose of the magic circle, various basic magic runes will also be used. Those that transmit magic power, amplify effects, shield effects, etc. The magic circle can be regarded as an article written in magic words, and the sentences in the article should be arranged in the style of the magic circle. So mastering the magic words is just the beginning. Next, you have to write sentences. The sentences should be smooth, concise, and unambiguous. Then you have to write the sentences, which is the most difficult. You can't let the people follow it, but not know it, and you can't let the magic words be written as "I ate fruit and had diarrhea." Kyle believes that the consequence of using magic words in this way is nothing but explosion. At 8 o'clock in the evening, when Kyle was tortured to death by the big magic book and was about to go back to the dormitory to continue thinking, a first-year snake walked up to Kyle and whispered, "Senior Shafiq, Professor Snape wants you to go to his office." After that, he lowered his head and didn't dare to look at Kyle's reaction, turned around and ran away. The sharp-eyed Kyle seemed to see the red corners of the snake's eyes. Well, another kid who was deceived by rumors. Kyle has always been hospitable and has made many friends. He would never bully a child. I don't know what he is afraid of. Maybe the strong wind blinded him. No longer thinking about the little snake, Kyle walked slowly to the door of Snape's office, adjusted his robe a little, and then knocked on the door. Dong, dong dong, the door of the office opened. Unexpectedly, in addition to the professor, Malfoy, who was newly enrolled this year, was also in the office. Glancing at Malfoy, Kyle bowed slightly and said, "Professor, are you looking for me?" Snape glanced at Kyle, just nodded, and then raised his hand to signal Kyle to wait. Then, a low voice sounded slowly, "Mr. Malfoy, I believe your shrewd father has told you how to live in Hogwarts. I also believe that as a qualified Malfoy, I can guarantee that you can get a comfortable living environment anywhere." After that, he stopped looking at Malfoy. "Of course, Professor." He bowed with aristocratic demeanor, nodded politely to Kyle, then turned and retreated, and gently closed the door. "Why, your simple brain finally remembered to make friends with nobles." Seeing Kyle's thoughtful look, the Slytherin Snake King sprayed venom. "Of course not, Professor. I just suddenly found that Mr. Malfoy's performance is not as bad as the rumors." "Of course," the professor said disdainfully, "as the most glamorous noble now, how could Malfoy be a brainless fool? Except when facing Potter." Of course, Kyle dared to think about this sentence in his heart, and didn't say it out loud. Since the beginning of the school, Malfoy's performance in front of Potter can only be described as horrible. "So Professor, have you finally made up your mind to teach me how to improve my reputation, brew glory, and even prevent death?" Kyle teased. As a source of trouble who has caused countless troubles to the professor and has been stared at by the Snake King's defies for 3 years, it is obvious that Kyle has a certain immunity to the professor. This sentence was the professor's opening remarks in Potter's first potion class. "You are here to learn the precise science and strict craftsmanship of potion preparation. Since there is no foolish waving of wands here, many of you will not believe that this is magic. I don't expect you to truly understand the beauty of the simmering crucible with white smoke and bursts of fragrance. You will not really understand the magical power of the liquid flowing into people's veins, which makes people excited and confused. I can teach you how to improve your reputation, brew glory, and even prevent death, but there must be one thing, that is, you are not the kind of stupid fools I often meet." With the professor's greasy long hair, waxy and gloomy face, the flat tone of a record player, and the black robes fluttering behind him as he strode, the whole class was silent after a deterrent opening speech. It must be said that as the Dean of Slytherin, whether it is the demeanor of his gestures or the tone of his words, he is full of aura. The mixture of sharp, gloomy and vicissitudes of life makes the professor stand anywhere and become impossible to ignore. "It seems that I have to remind you, Mr. Kyle, not to use your poor brain to imagine the greatness of potions. What, the professor of magic and alchemy can no longer satisfy you, and finally remember your poor dean." The slow speed of speech matched the professor's cold tone and the terrifying gaze. Even with Kyle's psychological quality, he couldn't help but feel nervous inside, and turned his eyes away unnaturally. He knew that this was the professor expressing his dissatisfaction with his neglect of the potion class. "Don't make fun of me, Professor. You know, in my heart, potions and other subjects are subjects worth exploring for a lifetime. But you know me, I just want to move forward towards the goal in my heart." After hearing this, the professor sneered coldly, but did not continue to pester him, but instead said, "I heard that you have been paying close attention to the great savior recently. You have enough troubles. I hope you know what to do, and what not to do." "Of course, Professor," Kyle replied. "I'm just curious about what is different about the savior." The professor was obviously not satisfied with this slightly perfunctory answer, but did not say much. Just as Kyle could slightly understand the professor's thoughts, the professor could probably guess one or two about Kyle's thoughts. Because of this, the professor believed that the reason was not just that simple. But it was obvious that the professor just wanted to remind Kyle not to cross the line, and then said, "Remember your words, Mr. Kyle." As he spoke, he took out a roll of parchment, handed it to Kyle, and said, "Okay, you can go back. I believe you will not like the punishment after being caught during curfew." Kyle did not take the professor's sarcasm to heart, but looked at the parchment with a slightly eager look. These were some questions that Kyle asked the professor during the holiday, and now, the answers are finally here. Chapter 6. The floating city is too expensive. Let's make a model instead. What the professor gave Kyle was some basic information about the energy storage room and application examples. In fact, the basic information about the energy storage room is relatively easy to find. At least there are no less than 5 books introducing this knowledge in the library of Hogwarts. However, the gap between reading books and making a finished product requires wizards to use several years or even decades of practice and research to make up for it. The application examples given by the professor are of course not very detailed, but the practical application examples and various experiences will save Kyle years of time. In the process of discussing with the professor, Kyle did not reveal his thoughts to the professor. I thought that according to the professor's personality, he would not pay attention to Kyle's request for information. Unexpectedly, although the professor still had a cold face and said impatiently that he would get out of here if he had nothing to do, Kyle was still very grateful. After saying goodbye to the professor, Kyle couldn't wait to go back to the dormitory. According to the tradition of Slytherin, the dormitory of the head of each grade is a single room, so Kyle will not be disturbed by others when doing research in the dormitory, and he doesn't have to worry about others peeping into his secrets. It is precisely because of this that Kyle would become the chief of this useless thing. Kyle returned to the dormitory and simply cleaned up and washed up. Then he could not wait to open the parchment given by the professor. The essence of the energy storage room is to absorb and store the energy between heaven and earth that is difficult to sense and use, as well as the magic power that wizards usually waste. The amount of free energy between heaven and earth is extremely large, but it is extremely inert. It is difficult for wizards to use their own magic and mental power as a fulcrum to pry these energies for their own use. For thousands of years, wizards have not stopped studying these inert energies, trying to find ways to use these powers to cast spells that far exceed the limits of human ability. Unfortunately, judging from the current results, this is just a delusion. However, after so many years of research, wizards have not gained nothing. Finally, they have found a few ways to use these energies in a limited way. Although it has many disadvantages such as low efficiency, inconvenient use, and high threshold, it is undoubtedly a great progress for wizards. The energy storage room is a product of this background. A good enough energy storage room can not only cope with the daily consumption of the mana, but also make the mana equipped with an energy storage room a difficult fortress that no force wants to provoke. The description of the background of the energy storage room at the beginning of the article made Kyle a little silent. For thousands of years, there has been no shortage of genius wizards studying how to use inert energy. However, no matter how to improve the energy storage room, there has been little effect. Even if Kyle claims to be talented and has the help of the Goldfinger, it is still unknown what he can research. It is very likely that countless money will be spent, but only loneliness will be researched. Sensing the negative thoughts in his heart, Kyle slowed down a little, calmed down his mood, and continued to read. At the same time, he noticed that as Kyle read, the progress bar of improving the use of inert energy and the Goldfinger was flickering slightly. This made Kyle a little excited. According to Kyle's exploration of the Goldfinger, Kyle's behavior was judged by the system as effective practice. This is enough to prove that Kyle's research direction is not wrong. Suppressing his excitement, Kyle put away his messy thoughts and continued reading. The article then introduced in detail the basic technical reserves needed to build an energy storage room, including magic circles, spells, alchemical items, and the catalog of books related to each part of the knowledge. It can be said that according to the guidance of this article, as long as you work hard enough and have a certain amount of talent or funds, you can completely copy a basic energy storage room. This made Kyle more grateful to the professor. It is no exaggeration to say that this article is already qualified to be a bottom line inheritance for some small nobles. Thoroughly understanding the content of the article is enough for these small nobles to use it as a foundation for their foothold in the magic world. After simply reading the content, Kyle began to sort out the catalog listed in the article. From the most basic books such as Basic Magic Runes, Basic Application of Magic Circles, and Simple Alchemy, to detailed explanation of Advanced Magic Runes, alchemical application of several special materials, and even the famous Advanced Black Magic. It is said that this is a black magic book that even the Dark Lord admires. Simply classify these books and mark them as read and unread. After counting, there are nearly 200 books involved, a despairing number. Fortunately, 50 of them are basic books, and Kyle has already studied most of them, but the rest are still a headache. Kyle decided to go to the library tomorrow and flip through the public reading section to see which books can be borrowed directly. For the rest, he can only find a way to get to the restricted book area to see if there are any. If he can't get them for free at Hogwarts, it will cost Kyle a lot to get the rest. Thinking of this, Kyle reorganized his plan again. At present, the initial goal is going smoothly. At least the basic knowledge required has a direction, and the rest requires Kyle to study hard. This part is not bad. Since he released magic 10,000 times to train the fainting to level 2, Kyle's patience for magic has increased sharply. The most headache for Kyle is the funds. If it is just to study spells, it will not cost much, but the cost of learning magic runes and alchemy is not small. From the most basic material costs to various auxiliary tools, all of them cost a small amount of money. Especially in the early stage of learning, there is only waste and no output. This period will be the most painful time for Kyle. Thinking about the funds he can use and the amount of money needed for the experiment, Kyle is really troubled. Many things can be made up and saved, but the experimental equipment and consumables are really impossible to save. After all, the skin of a grass snake and the skin of a basilisk are completely different things, and there is no way to replace them. As a last resort, Kyle decided to develop some products first to make money. Kyle is familiar with business. After all, he did this in his previous life. From drawing big cakes to attract investment, to blowing products and advertising, from hunger marketing to bundled sales, making money is really not difficult for Kyle. Since he decided to make money first, Kyle thought about it, and the target group must be women and children. After all, the money from these two groups is the easiest to make. Combining the technology in hand in the target audience, Kyle suddenly brightened up. Since he can't make a floating city, then make a floating model. A floating model with certain protection, attack ability, flight and invisibility. I believe no little wizard can refuse it. Kyle thought a lot about the choice of model, from castles, alchemical puppets to various magical creatures. In the end, it was decided to make it based on the prototype of the alchemical puppet. A cockpit is left in the middle, so the little wizard can command from outside, or sit in the cockpit to control. In short, it is a combination of magic version of Gundam and Eva. Thinking of the little wizard, I thought of the platinum noble I just met at night. Thinking of the other part, his peacock character that was said to be inherited from the family, Kyle couldn't help laughing. His first investment seemed to have a solution. Chapter 7, School Monster. The next day, on the corridor of the third floor, just as Kyle was thinking about how to pretend to be casual and reveal his magic puppet plan to Malfoy, a quarrel came from the corner of the corridor. What do you think they want to do by locking such a scary monster in the school? What are your eyes for, guys? Don't you see what's under its feet? It was a female voice. Are you talking about the floor? A new voice appeared. A boy's. I didn't pay attention to its feet. I only paid attention to its head. No, I don't mean the floor. It's standing on a trapdoor. Obviously, it's guarding something. The girl said angrily. Before Kyle could understand what was going on, he saw a girl with fluffy hair angrily walking out from the corner. She was a Gryffindor. Not long after, two little boys also walked out with their shoulders shrugged. One of them was the famous savior. The other had red hair and seemed to be a real lie. The red-haired boy was mumbling something to the savior, and when he saw Kyle, a Slytherin, he was very brave to glare at him. Very good. This is very Gryffindor. Ignoring the provocation of the little devil, Kyle looked at the savior with interest. Although the magic world has made the savior a myth, from Kyle's observation during the school term, Potter is just an ordinary little boy. He likes food, collects cards from strange flavored beans with his classmates, and always wants to run outside the castle to play. He doesn't like to do homework, hides from the teacher, and sits at the back in class. He is not born with knowledge, nor does he show strong magic power. The legendary isolation curse, the human-shaped self-propelled patronus charm, and the natural nemesis of evil are even more nonsense. At least Kyle has seen more than once that Potter was hit by Malfoy's small curses such as the front teeth stick and the tarantella dance. It seems that the story behind defeating the Dark Lord is very exciting. But Potter does have some unusual talents. Let's not talk about the wonderful performance in the flying class that has just been spread recently. Just what Kyle saw with his own eyes. After being hit by the tarantella dance, he was able to spin and jump and beat Malfoy to a pulp, which fully demonstrated Potter's athletic and fighting talents. The popping here is a factual description, not an adjective. The red-haired boy is obviously not a polite child. After glaring at Kyle, he rushed forward regardless of anything. Potter followed behind, looked at Kyle a little embarrassed, and ran after him. Potter seemed to have been brainwashed by Gryffindor. He, such a friendly Slytherin, could not get a friendly smile from Potter. I think the red-haired boy just now has said a lot of bad things about Slytherin in Potter's ear, and the red-haired boy actually dared to glare at him. This is the most serious provocation Kyle has received in the past 2 years. Bullying the first-year kid is obviously not Kyle's cup of tea. But Kyle remembered that the little red-haired boy has a pair of twin brothers, also Gryffindor. Kyle often saw them making a mess in the academy, which was a good seasoning for Kyle's academy life in the past few years. In order not to affect the twins' comedy performances in front of Kyle in the future, of course, they couldn't be targeted. But it doesn't matter, the red-haired family is obviously prosperous. It seems that he has an older brother who is in the 5th year. Of course, he is also a Gryffindor. I believe that if I beat up a 5th year Gryffindor, no one will think that Kyle is bullying the weak, Kyle thought, stroking his chin. The train of thought turned away from the red-haired family and returned to the topic they just discussed or argued about. Obviously, with the protagonist's enrollment, the main line of the story has begun. The actions of the protagonist group are limited to the school, so this monster can only be in the school. As for the location, it is nothing more than the Forbidden Forest, the secret passage, and of course the corridor on the 3rd floor on the right hand side, which has just become a forbidden area this year. Think about what old Deng said at the opening ceremony. If you don't want to die tragically, don't go to the corridor on the 3rd floor on the right hand side within this year. What can cause students to die tragically? Although this is an exaggeration, it is obvious that the things in the corridor are not docile and harmless. Kyle walked towards the stairs while thinking. At first, Kyle was inclined to believe that the Philosopher's Stone was in the hands of the boss in the first story. The boss was a dark wizard, and it was most likely that he met Potter during the holidays. After being defeated, the Philosopher's Stone fell into Potter's hands. This is the most reasonable speculation, although it is now said that there is only one Philosopher's Stone in existence, in the hands of Nick Flamel. But no one can guarantee whether there will be a Philosopher's Stone handed down from ancient times that will be obtained by a dark wizard. Could it be that a dark wizard broke into Hogwarts with the Philosopher's Stone? Not to mention how courageous this dark wizard would need. The key is that if a dark wizard cannot enter the gate of Hogwarts, he will be beaten out of his teeth by old Dumbledore. And this assumption is not reasonable. The dark wizard is alive and well. Why would he break into Hogwarts for no reason? Is he here to watch the Quidditch game? Imagine that the dark wizard was carrying a treasure, eating hot pot, singing songs, and walking on the small path of Hogwarts with great interest. In the end, he was robbed by Dumbledore before entering the gate of Hogwarts. If this is the plot, it would be unfair to the billions of dollars of output value of Harry Potter in the previous life. This possibility was ruled out by Kyle at the first time. Another possibility is that the final boss sneaked into the school with the Philosopher's Stone, met Potter, and was defeated. This is also not very reliable, not to mention the motive issue. This assumes that the boss came in through the secret passage and was not discovered by the principal, professors, ghosts, and portraits along the way. Then the exit of the secret passage must be opened on Potter's face to ensure that the boss met Potter as soon as he came out. Otherwise, the portrait in the corridor will visit the principal's office and then appear in front of the boss with the principal. As a result, the boss's teeth will be knocked out again. Even if the boss is lucky enough to catch up with the principal on a business trip and not in school. Professor Snape, Professor McGonagall, etc. will also teach the boss a lesson. This idea was of course ruled out by Kyle. However, when Kyle heard Potter and the others discussing what the monster was guarding, an incredible idea rushed into his mind. It couldn't be that the plot of the first grade was that the school kept the Philosopher's Stone in the school, which attracted the attention of the final boss. Then the process of the Dark Wizard sneaking into the school to steal the treasure was exposed by Potter, and the final boss was killed by Potter and the headmaster and the dean. But after thinking about it, let's not talk about the question of how to sneak in. Why did Dumbledore put the Philosopher's Stone in the school for guarding? Wouldn't it be better to carry it with him? Except for the old man Dumbledore who lost the Philosopher's Stone in his old age. Who else could steal it? This reason alone is enough to shoot this idea. After thinking about it, Kyle still tends to think that the Philosopher's Stone should only appear during the holidays. As for the trapdoor that Potter and the others mentioned, it should be a secret hidden somewhere in the Forbidden Forest. It is likely to be used to give equipment and benefits to the protagonist at the beginning of the story. Think about the knowledge and ability of the first grade. A red hat can be called a monster. In his previous life, Kyle loved to read detective novels, which trained him to have a meticulous logical thinking and reasoning ability. Based on the current conditions, Kyle believed that his reasoning was correct. As for the corridor on the third floor, Kyle was a little interested. I haven't heard that any professor is going to conduct any dangerous experiments. Why would the entire corridor be blocked? After sorting out the information he just got, Kyle felt that he seemed to have to get to know Gryffindor again. He was just a first year student, and he had just started school for less than a month, and he dared to break into the Forbidden Forest. How could he be so suicidal? Thinking of this, Kyle felt that he seemed to sympathize with Madame Pomfrey. If the little lions of Gryffindor are all suicidal during their time at school, Madame Pomfrey, who is in charge of the medical wing, must be much busier than she knows. Kyle sighed. Unknowingly, Kyle had walked to the junction of the left and right corridors on the third floor. Kyle, who was supposed to go to the fourth floor for the transfiguration class, stopped at the locked wooden door in the corridor on the right. Although I thought it was not the monster and trapdoor that Potter and the others were talking about, it was undeniable that the previous episode had aroused some interest in the closed corridor. After looking around to make sure there was no one, Kyle took out his wand. Allow open. The door opened in response. I was addicted to the game and couldn't extricate myself. I really didn't want to write. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8, Overturning the Conjecture. Allow Cave Close. If there is a closing spell, Kyle guessed that it must be this one. Kyle closed the door at the fastest speed in his life, with a look of pain on his face. What logical thinking, what reasoning ability. Kyle could only say that Conan was just a cartoon. What reasoning ability could he cultivate? Without stopping, Kyle walked quickly to the fourth floor. The three-headed dog behind the door slapped Kyle's face, but it was obvious that Kyle didn't care much. His reasoning was based on normal thinking under normal circumstances, and it was obvious that the scene in front of him was not within the normal range. Kyle's feet were full of wind, but it did not affect the rapid rotation of his brain. The three little brats of Gryffindor were right. The three-headed dog was indeed guarding something. The corridor on the third floor was designated as a restricted area, precisely because of the three-headed dog's strong aggressiveness. People who don't want to die tragically should not go to the corridor on the right hand side of the third floor within this year. This is really not an exaggeration. What kind of thing needs such a dangerous magical creature to guard? Are there other guards behind the trapdoor? Did all the teachers agree to this matter, or did the principal decide it himself? Does the school board know that their child, Zero, and the three-headed dog are in the same school? Most importantly, what is the reason for the formation of the restricted area on the third floor? Let's not talk about whether there are other means of protection behind the door. Just a three-headed dog is enough to show the preciousness of the items behind the door. If it is not easy to understand just saying that it is a 5x level magical creature, then how about putting it in another way, the same level as a dragon? Although the three-headed dog behind the door is obviously still in its infancy and has not reached the standard size of an adult, it is far from the legendary three-headed dog of hell. But whether it is an adult or not, this guy is equally dangerous to the little wizard. What is the school thinking of blocking it with a door that a first-year kid can open with a spell? For the first time, Kyle was dissatisfied with the school. It is true that Kyle had a very bad school experience in the first 2 years of school, but this has nothing to do with the school. On the contrary, the dean has been protecting him. He blocked all attacks outside the rules for him. As for the other teachers and the principal, although they didn't say anything explicitly, they were all somewhat protective of him. All the good impressions were destroyed today. It's not aimed at any particular teacher, but at all the people who participated in this protection plan. The three-headed dog is obviously guarding the Philosopher's Stone. Only something as rare and precious as the Philosopher's Stone is worthy of such a high standard of protection. The adventure of the three saviors in the first year should be in the corridor on the third floor. I really don't know how they got through the three-headed dog. Kyle, who was not interested in the adventures of the saviors, decided to pay more attention to Potter. The three-headed dog appeared in the first year. I really don't know what kind of moths will come out in the remaining 6 years. An adult dragon? Kyle guessed that the adventure in the first year should be the least dangerous, and it is just right to observe the means and purpose of the people behind the scenes. Whether it is the final boss or the school's senior management. This year's villain, can't he already be in the school? Suddenly, this idea came into Kyle's head. Since it is confirmed that the Philosopher's Stone is in the school, the previous inference that Potter met the villain outside the school can be overturned, which makes him a little annoyed. In order to infer the main line of this year, Kyle has spent a lot of thought. Unfortunately, all the hard work was in vain. Following the previous train of thought, Kyle continued to think. It is impossible for the villain to break into the school by force. After all, the school's apparent strength is not a joke. If Dumbledore lets the final villain break into the school and then relies on a first-year kid to win, then he can apply for retirement and live in St. Mungo's to see if he has a brain. A careful plan is needed before stealing. This requires sufficient intelligence as support. Kyle can only think of two possibilities. The first is that there is an insider in the school who can provide enough intelligence for the villain. But how to sneak in is also a problem. The distance from the secret passage to the corridor on the third floor is enough for the villain to be exposed countless times, but the invisibility cloak and the disillusionment spell can solve this problem. The second is that the villain has already invaded the school, and Kyle has already thought of method for the villain polyjuice potion. Following this idea, if the person being replaced is a teacher, there are a lot of interactions between teachers, and they eat at a long table every day. And the teachers who know about this matter will definitely be vigilant and easy to be exposed, but the advantage is that it is easier to obtain intelligence. If the person to be replaced is a student, you only need to find a lonely and unsociable student to minimize the risk. However, the disadvantage is that it is not easy to obtain intelligence, and the villain can only explore behind the door little by little. In short, the school has become a little dangerous this year, Kyle thought with narrowed eyes. But these are actually not very relevant to Kyle. After all, he is not going to participate in foreseeable dangers. He just wants to figure out what will happen, and the situation and ideas of all parties. The protagonist has appeared, and the next few years will not be stable. It is better to make some preparations in advance. But thinking about it, a terrible idea suddenly appeared. Are these Harry Potter books really about Potter's 7 years of school life? It won't be like a biography, writing about Potter's life. As soon as this idea came up, Kyle felt a little embarrassed. Yes, embarrassed. What if the content of the book is that he got the Philosopher's Stone at the age of 18, entered the Chamber of Secrets at the age of 20, and got the Deathly Hallows before dying to avoid death? Then I'm fighting wits and courage with the air. Kyle thought helplessly. After all, the protagonist's 7-year school career may be just a sentence in the book. The story begins when Harry Potter graduates from Hogwarts as an excellent Gryffindor. If so, Kyle felt that he would suffer from neurasthenia. Fortunately, the three-headed dog has appeared, and the content of the first Philosopher's Stone should be happening. Of course, this may also be just another sentence in the book. Harry is relatively familiar with 5x level magical creatures. In his first year, he had already faced the three-headed dog and eventually became friends with him. Thinking of this, Kyle became more and more headache. The disadvantage of knowing only a little about the plot appeared, and everything seemed to be plausible. The limited information became something that constrained Kyle's thinking. After thinking for a long time without any results, and messing up his direction, Kyle decisively decided to give up. Anyway, he didn't want to get any benefits, so there was no need to think too much about the plot. He just needed to pay attention to Potter's actions. On the one hand, he collected information about the school and the villains, and on the other hand, he could also judge the timeline of the plot. If it is confirmed that the story is about 7 years of enrollment, then Kyle should pay more attention in the past few years. If it was about Potter's life, that would be even better, as it meant that Kyle would be able to spend the remaining years of his school life smoothly. After no longer thinking about these things that made him feel overwhelmed, Kyle walked directly into the classroom and took out the parchment that he was going to ask Professor McGonagall. Thinking of the professor knowing the transfiguration topic he was studying, Kyle believed that the expression on his face would be very interesting. Chapter 9 Transfiguration Lesson. Although Professor McGonagall of Transfiguration is the head of Gryffindor, she is always impartial in dealing with student issues. She has never deliberately helped Kyle, and all the points that should be deducted were not reduced. But most of Kyle's opponents are worse off than Kyle. Of course, those who were taught a lesson by Kyle were either pure-blood supporters or snobs who bullied the weak and feared the strong, and the other party itself was unreasonable. Not long after Kyle sat down, Professor McGonagall announced the start of the class. The main content of Transfiguration this semester is to transform inanimate objects into living things through transfiguration. The lower limit of Transfiguration magic is extremely low, and the upper limit is extremely high. This can actually be seen from transforming inanimate objects into living objects. Transfiguring a stone into a bird, the bird that is transformed, is not just for show. It not only has internal organs and various body organs, but the bird even feels pain, fear, and hunger. According to Kyle, apart from the transfiguration spell, only some advanced techniques in alchemy can achieve this effect, making it have memory, thinking, and logical judgment ability. Hogwarts has a magic item that is made by combining two methods. It is the famous sorting hat. If you block the sorting hat and talk to it, people who don't know the truth will never think that they are talking to a hat. In the floating city imagined by Kyle, there should be such an intelligent core. It plays a role similar to the artificial intelligence in the previous life, assisting Kyle in managing the floating city. Transfiguration, also known as the least magical magic, is not something he can learn by memorizing the theory, practicing the spell, and swinging the stick accurately. He needs to be based on excellent imagination and guided by perceptual cognition to successfully transform. Therefore, the best time to lay the foundation for transfiguration is childhood. Innocent and full of whimsical little wizards are most likely to touch the threshold of transfiguration and move forward quickly. Although Kyle has the hardware of an older boy, he is a wretched uncle at heart, which is obviously not within the scope of his talent in transfiguration. This also led to Kyle's poor performance in transfiguration courses. Just like the final exam of the first grade, the question was to turn a mouse into a snuff box. Most of the students performed extremely well, and could even make the snuff box full of colorful paintings. The students with poor grades only complained to their classmates worriedly, "My snuff box still has a mouse beard. What should I do? Will the professor give me a P?" Fail. Kyle was amazing. Kyle's mouse was eating the cookies on the table calmly until the end of the exam. Only the position of the mouse hair on its body had changed a little, and it vaguely looked like a snuff box. The final assessment result made Kyle pale. He believed that, even if he used the cutting spell to shave the mouse's hair, it would look better than the mouse hair snuff box transformed by transfiguration. The parchment paper prepared this time was a rectification suggestion for his extremely poor transfiguration. Professor McGonagall on the podium was talking about the key points of life transfiguration. Kyle took notes and tried to follow the professor's instructions to imagine the stone on the table as a flexible and spiritual white dove. According to the professor, the more specific and vivid the imagination is, the more it will help the magic succeed. But unfortunately, until the bell rang, Kyle only turned into a few feathers on the stone in front of him. After the other students left the classroom, Kyle stood up and walked towards the professor. "Professor McGonagall, can I take a few minutes of your time?" "Of course, Mr. Shafiq, of course." Professor McGonagall, who seemed surprised that a poor student would take the initiative to ask the teacher for advice, answered with a little surprise. "Professor, you know that my transfiguration grades have always been poor. This is not because I don't pay enough attention to the transfiguration class or lack of enough practice, but I seem to lack some talent for learning transfiguration. Don't belittle yourself, Mr. Kyle. I understand your efforts and achievements in other subjects. Maybe you just haven't found the key to open the door to transfiguration." Professor McGonagall interrupted Kyle. "It's not like that, Professor. I have communicated with other students. Other students can easily imagine the wooden stick as a silver needle and the cup as a rabbit. Even if I try hard to force myself to imagine, my reason will tell me that the cup is a cup and the wooden stick is a wooden stick. After other young wizards successfully cast spells and remember this feeling, even if they lose their once wild imagination as they grow older, it will not affect their continued study of transfiguration, because they have experienced the true meaning of transfiguration when they were innocent and young, and their physical memory will help them to move forward. And I obviously lack this talent, which is why I stand in front of the door of transfiguration, but have never been able to enter. I know myself very well. I can't force myself to imagine the cup as a rabbit, so I found a different way for myself, and I hope to get your guidance," Kyle said, handing the prepared parchment to the professor. The professor glanced at the parchment with a little uneasiness, and finally took it. After all, the wizards who wanted to take shortcuts in history did not choose such a good method. The process afterwards was a little awkward. The professor glanced at the parchment. The professor looked at the parchment carefully. The professor frowned. The professor said he didn't understand. "Kyle, it seems that you have added some uncommon things to your research method?" Kyle shrugged. "Yes, Professor, I added some knowledge from the Muggle world." Kyle's answer made the professor frown a little, because she couldn't understand the Muggle knowledge on the parchment at all. But after looking at Kyle's notes on it and thinking about it, McGonagall still made a comment. "To be honest, Kyle, I don't quite understand how these Muggle methods are achieved, but the methods you mentioned will not interfere with the operation of your magic. It seems that they are just helping you change your cognition. I don't think there is any big problem." Then, she reminded him seriously, "But this is just my personal inference. Kyle, if you want to try this method, it's best to do it under the supervision of a wizard with enough experience." Kyle nodded silently, then said goodbye to the professor, and walked out of the classroom. Addicted to games, unable to extricate himself, playing Odyssey during the day and World of Warcraft at night, he had no intention of writing. Chapter 10, Alternative Applications of the Protection Spell. After leaving the classroom, Kyle went straight back to the dormitory. He had obtained a lot of information in the past 2 days. After leaving the classroom, Kyle did not go to the library, but went to the dormitory. He decided to be alone and calm down, and sort out his thoughts. Back in the dormitory, Kyle threw himself on the sofa. While taking out his notebook to organize his thoughts, he took out his wand. Pointing the wand at his head, a wisp of white smoke that looked like mist floated from his temple and connected to the position of the head of the wand. This was Kyle's latest understanding of magic runes, alchemy, and energy storage room. A big silver dog came over. This was the Patroness that Kyle summoned with the Patroness charm. The silver light on the big dog kept flashing, as if it was sending some signal to Kyle. At the same time, Kyle slowly moved the wand to the head of the silver dog. Because of the excessive memory, Kyle was a little strenuous to release this magic. As the white smoke of memory slowly melted into the head of the silver dog, Kyle breathed a sigh of relief. The big dog seemed very smart, and the light of wisdom flashed in his eyes. The big dog nodded to Kyle, then picked up the energy storage room information on the table, and put it on the ground, and began to read it attentively. That's right, the big dog actually read the magic information. Or rather, a fake creature summoned by the Patronus charm was actually reading a piece of magic information. This is a mixed magic of the Patronus charm and legilimency. In the 2nd grade, Kyle first learned about the Patronus charm in detailed introduction to white magic. According to the book, after the Patronus charm is studied to a certain extent, a physical Patronus can be summoned. At this time, the Patronus has a simple mind and can help the caster to transmit information. Just tell it who to transmit the information to, and the Patronus will find the target by itself and can accept some simple instructions. After the magic is lifted, the scene seen by the Patronus will also be fed back to the caster to a certain extent. After learning about this, Kyle suddenly thought of a popular comic in his previous life, Naruto, and the unknown ninjutsu in it, multiple shadow clone. This ninjutsu has a special setting, that is, each clone has its own consciousness, can fight, explore, and even practice ninjutsu, and do research on its own. After the ninjutsu is released, all the perceptions and memories will be transmitted back to the subject. The protagonist of the comics relied on this ninjutsu Goldfinger to emerge in the early stage of the comics. The Goldfinger brought by Kyle through time has been explored for 2 uses. One is to assist Kyle in practicing spells, alchemy and other techniques. The second is to assist in research. As long as the direction is correct, the progress bar of the project will move forward. Every 10% of the progress bar will feed back to Kyle a lot of perception, prompting him to burst out more inspiration. Both of these uses require the support of magic theory. The first use, the deeper the magic theory, the faster the skill upgrade. The second use requires a lot of theoretical support to advance the progress bar. The Patronus spell gave Kyle hope of giving himself a cheat. Imagine using the Patronus spell to learn magic theory and do research. After the magic is released, all memory perceptions are fed back to Kyle, promoting the upgrade of the Goldfinger magic theory and advancing the research progress. Then the Goldfinger feedbacks the perception. Kyle injects the perception into the Patronus spell, and the spell continues to study. This is no longer an efficiency improvement of 1 + 1 = 2, because it is equivalent to the Patronus charm, and it can also enjoy the bonus of the Goldfinger. The 2 hanging walls work together to do research, and Kyle himself dared not imagine what kind of results could be achieved. In order to achieve the goal of upgrading the Goldfinger, Kyle began to practice the Patronus charm constantly and strengthen the proficiency of the spell. The Patronus charm also became Kyle's first full level magic. The effect after the full level is that the Patronus can stay 24 hours a day and has a strong magic resistance and a huge lethality to evil. As for the other matching magic, Kyle's initial idea should be transfiguration. Transfiguration gives the Patronus a higher wisdom, so as to strengthen the memory and perception of feedback, but in the face of reality, Kyle had to give up. The extremely low talent for transfiguration makes Kyle's effective practice ratio very low and the efficiency is very poor. After that, Kyle compared the 2 plans of improving the Patronus charm and studying memory magic. In the end, he chose to cultivate memory magic and then find a way to combine the 2 magics together. Because Kyle found that the Patronus charm looked like a white magic involving the use of emotions. When releasing magic, recall happy and joyful memories and recall the feeling at that time, and you will be able to release it successfully. And happy and joyful memories can enhance the power of the Patronus. But in fact, the Patronus spell has already involved the most fundamental part of a person, the soul. In fact, it requires the use of happy emotions to drive the power of the soul in order to release it successfully. This makes it easy to learn the Patronus spell by practicing step by step. But if you want to transform it, the magic theory required is too advanced, far beyond what Kyle can get involved with now. The accident that happened when the Patronus spell was practiced to the highest level also verified Kyle's conjecture. At the moment, when the spell was upgraded to the highest level, Kyle fainted due to the severe pain. Because the Patronus spell, after reaching the maximum level, actually tore a piece of Kyle's soul. Chapter 11. Alternative applications of the protection spell. This situation made Kyle's hands and feet cold. The integrity of the soul is beyond doubt. Except for the craziest black wizard, no one would want to attack his own soul. Even the liches in the movies and TV shows of the previous life only transferred their souls to the life box instead of cutting them. And no matter what their positions and views on good and evil were in their lifetime, after being transformed into a lich, they would inevitably be affected by negative energy, gradually becoming indifferent and cruel, and their views on life would gradually change. Only a few liches escaped this fate. Suppressing his inner uneasiness, Kyle released a dozen colorful spells on himself to check himself. It was strange that, although a fragment of Kyle's soul was torn off and integrated into the Patronus charm, his own state was very good, and various detection spells did not feed back negative information. However, Kyle did not relax because of this. Because of this strange state, Kyle thought of an evil magic product, Horcrux. It is said that this is an evil magic ritual invented by the ancient Greek black wizard Herbo, which cuts his own soul by killing life and keeps the cut soul in a device that has been released with countless spells. Helbo hoped to escape the pursuit of the god of death, but he never appeared in history. There are rumors that Helbo became extremely crazy in his later years, and there are also rumors that he was backfired by the evil magic he invented, and the trauma of his soul caused him to die on the spot. In short, it was not a good ending. But the detection spell did not feed back any negative information, which made Kyle a little helpless. In the following time, Kyle established a table to record his status, behavior and thoughts every day. Once his thinking was affected, whether he became crazy or his personality was deviated, he could find the problem in time by comparing the changes in the records. At the same time, Kyle began to browse books related to the soul in the library. Whether it was detection methods, related magic, conjectures, or historical records and rumors about changes in the soul, Kyle did not let go. But unfortunately, the records of soul damage did not end well. From the beginning of the decline in spellcasting ability, slow thinking, to becoming a squib, and even gradually going crazy. The more Kyle studied, the more he felt that the former Dark Lord seemed to have also entered the soul field, and was severely injured. Considering that the name Voldemort means leaping over death, Kyle has reason to suspect that the Dark Lord made a Horcrux for himself. In the early days of the Dark Lord's rise, he was undoubtedly elegant and powerful. Kyle couldn't imagine how he could have won over so many pureblood families without sufficient personal charm and leadership. After all, the title of a descendant of Slytherin is not enough to make the proud pureblood nobles bow down. Looking at the later period of the Dark Lord, he became crazy and extreme. The Death Eaters he led also changed from a political group with a clear purpose to a terrorist organization dominated by pureblood supremacy, with the slogan of eliminating half-bloods and muggle wizards, and with the goal of ruling the wizarding world. The Death Eaters in the later period, similar to some organizations in the previous life, spread fear, preached death, and were disgusting. Although these organizations had appeared in the Motherland in the previous life, they were different from the weak Ministry of Magic. The Motherland in the previous life was strong and united. Individual minority element could neither resist the iron fist of the Motherland nor the tide of the people, and ultimately failed to set off a wave. With the Dark Lord's experience, Kyle became more cautious about the current situation. After almost a month, after detailed and rigorous observation and thinking, Kyle came to a conclusion about his condition. First of all, the soul splitting that Kyle experienced was fundamentally different from the violent cutting recorded in various books. The soul stripping of the protection spell was more like extracting some renewable soul element from Kyle's soul. Then it absorbed Kyle's soul power to enrich it, and finally formed a not so healthy soul seed. This soul seed has all the basic element of a soul, and has a certain spirituality. According to Kyle's observation, due to the lack of element and soul power, it only showed a simple consciousness, not even as good as small mammals such as mice. Secondly, Kyle's soul did not become incomplete or damaged because of the stripping of a soul seed, but only became extremely weak due to the lack of soul element and soul power. Fortunately, these element and soul power can slowly recover over time. What finally made Kyle feel relieved was that he could merge this soul seed into his own soul at any time, and the two merged into one without any hidden injuries or disharmony. Kyle even found that this mutated Patronus spell was more important to him than he thought, and its importance was no less than the gold finger he carried. Chapter 12. Alternative applications of the protection spell. After a month of research, Kyle discovered that this mutated Patronus charm was more important to him than he had imagined, and its importance was no less than the golden finger he carried. The highest level of Patronus charm could actually slowly absorb inert energy, transform it into soul element, transform it into soul energy, and supply the soul seed to grow. This means that Kyle can completely reabsorb the grown soul seed to strengthen his own soul, and then split the original soul seed to let it absorb inert energy to strengthen itself. This simply overturned Kyle's cognition. According to Kyle's understanding, there are only a limited number of means in the magic world to replenish the consumption of the soul and repair the trauma of the soul. These means are either extremely profound, extremely bitter and difficult to understand, or the required materials are very precious or even extinct. Usually only a limited number of people in each era can master this means. As for the means of strengthening the soul, Kyle has never heard of it. Perhaps some nobles with a long history have this means, but they will definitely keep it as a family secret, and Kyle believes that it must be difficult to achieve. The manifestation of the strong soul feedback to the material world is the strong magic, the agility of thinking, the enhancement of magic resistance, etc. It can be said that the strength of the soul almost determines the upper limit of a wizard. Although the efficiency of the magic spell in absorbing inert energy is very slow, and the growth rate after feedback to Kyle is only 3% minus 5% a year, don't forget that Kyle's soul is originally the adult soul of the previous life, which is fused with the soul of the little wizard in this life, and Kyle's soul is still in the growth stage. This means that Kyle's soul energy after adulthood will be far greater than that of ordinary wizards. Coupled with the annual growth of 3% minus 5%, it seems that it is not impossible for Kyle to reach the level of Dumbledore and the Dark Lord, or even surpass them. After roughly understanding the effect of the Patronus charm, he did not take it lightly and still recorded his psychological changes. Although the soul was not violently divided, and no trauma was left, the Patronus charm is a magic composed entirely of positive energy. Kyle is also afraid that the soul power transformed from it will have some inexplicable effects on himself. For example, suddenly believing in light, beginning to reject lying, rejecting darker means, etc. This change comes from the soul, and it will not happen overnight, nor will it cause Kyle to be alert. It will only make Kyle feel that his thoughts have changed, and he will recognize this change from the bottom of his heart. This is the most terrifying thing. It's like an adult with perfect values is brainwashed, and he recognizes the brainwashing content from the bottom of his heart. He is no longer like himself. Fortunately, until the beginning of the 4th grade, Kyle did not find any major changes when comparing his own records, which made Kyle completely relieved. In the first year of the upgrade of the Patronus charm, all the energy absorbed by the soul seed was absorbed by Kyle to make up for the deficit of the split seed, resulting in the first year the spell did not become the golden finger of Kyle's research. In the second year, Kyle replenished the soul energy and no longer felt tired and sleepy. The Patronus charm was officially put into research. The soul seed after growth has a stronger spirituality. After Kyle injected his perception and memory of magic into the spell through legilimency, the study and research of basic magic theory fell on the Patronus charm. Thanks to the 24-hour non-stop and highly focused research on the magic spell, Kyle's magic theory level has grown rapidly in a year. He has established a complete basic magic theory network in his mind. Among them, several subjects that Kyle attaches great importance to have been studied to a relatively in-depth level. Since Kyle left the Silver Dog in the dormitory for independent research, he has released countless patronizing spells in his dormitory. White magic, black magic, magic circles, magic rituals, everything Kyle can find and learn, he has released them all. I believe that any stranger who breaks into Kyle's dormitory will leave a lifelong memory. But even so, Kyle is still not completely at ease and has always wanted to find a way to carry the Patronus spell with him without affecting his research. Kyle thought about carrying something with him and then casting the traceless extension spell to create a large enough space in it. But it is difficult for Kyle to guarantee that the carrier of the traceless extension spell will not be damaged. After all, accidents are everywhere, especially since the plot has begun. Kyle cannot guarantee that the school is completely safe now. In the end, this problem was not solved, and the silver dog could only be left in the dormitory temporarily. Chapter 13. Plans and Magical Puppet. No longer thinking about the gains and losses of the mutant Patronus spell, Kyle pulled his thoughts back to this year's plan. Originally, Kyle planned to ignore the disturbances of the plot. Anyway, the main plot happened outside the school and would not affect Kyle's life. But today's unexpected discovery forced Kyle to devote some of his energy to the savior. After all, danger might be lurking around Kyle. However, this situation is not completely without benefits. This allows Kyle to grasp the progress of the plot at the first time, and then confirm some of his own judgments. After confirming his attitude towards the savior, Kyle reconsidered his research. According to Kyle's plan, a portable energy storage room is to be made this year, and Kyle named it the Energy Storage Core. The power of the Energy Storage Core is definitely not as large as that of the Energy Storage Room, but as Kyle's current trump card, it is enough. After all, the energy that can be stored in an energy storage core will be amazing. If it is portable and miniaturized, the energy can be exported when needed, which is enough for Kyle to make a comeback when needed. Even if there is no good way to utilize energy, when facing danger, the energy storage core can be thrown out as a grenade and then blown up. I believe that the power will not disappoint its frustrating research difficulty. The research part has been promoted day and night by the Silver Dog, and I believe that the plan can be finalized before the end of this year. However, due to the current level of Kyle's magic skills, it is very likely that Kyle will have a design plan in his hand at the end of the year, but he will not be able to make it. In other words, the brain says I have learned it, and the hand says, no, you can't. That will become a sad story. In view of this situation, Kyle had to plan to reduce his time in the library. Instead, he practiced skills such as alchemy and magic. Thinking of this, Kyle was very fortunate that he had developed an alternative way to use the Patronus charm. If there was no Silver Dog, the research progress might only reach 1/3 of the current progress. After determining the general direction of action, Kyle began to make magic puppets. After all, without funds, all plans will not be possible. First of all, the appearance of this toy puppet must be able to win the love of little wizards. Secondly, it must have the functions of flying and protection, and can release some magic with gorgeous sound and light effects, and it must not be harmful. After setting the goal, Kyle began to write and draw on parchment. The appearance was quickly determined. One appearance borrowed from the traditional appearance of large puppets in the magic world. It looks stupid, like a huge stone man, but when the puppet is large enough, it will look majestic. Another one refers to the appearance of Gundam and Transformers in the Muggle world, which is a huge robot. The third one also uses the appearance of a robot, but it is full of steampunk style. Kyle plans to show these three appearances to the little wizards to see if they can get their approval. After that, it is the design of the magic circuit and all chemical components. In order to save costs, Kyle certainly hopes that when making puppets, the fewer all chemical components are used, the better, which also means that the difficulty of designing the magic circuit has risen sharply. First of all, start designing from the energy part. For this part of the magic rune, Kyle referred to the energy magic rune of the flying broom. After all, I have only heard of broomsticks falling from the sky due to poor controllability due to years of disrepair, or broken in the sky due to improper maintenance, but I have never heard of broomsticks falling from the sky due to insufficient power supply. In order to study magic runes, Kyle dismantled 4 or 5 broomsticks of the Crossweep and Comet series. Although they cannot be reassembled, Kyle has learned the operating principles of broomsticks and the design ideas of magic rune circuits, barely enough to use them on his toy puppets. Don't ask why he didn't dismantle the Nimbus 2000. Kyle knows that the Nimbus 2000 adopts a brand new design concept, a more efficient and simple magic rune circuit, but this is not Kyle's best choice. After all, the magic rune circuit of the Nimbus 2000 adopts too many brand new design concepts, and its stability has not been tested by time. Although the models of Crossweep and Comet are old, they are far behind the Nimbus in terms of performance and concept. But the flying brooms on the market, that have been used for decades, and can still fly normally, tell Kyle how terrible the magic stability of these two flying brooms is. Of course, it is also because Kyle has no money and cannot afford to buy a Nimbus 2000 for a search. Smiley face. Is the game not popular anymore, or the short video is not funny anymore? Why am I typing? Chapter 14 Magic Puppet. After determining the basic idea of the energy rune, Kyle began to work on the preliminary design. At the same time, the new research project of puppet toys appeared on the interface of the Goldfinger. There are 4 items under the project: energy, protection, flight, and sound and light effects. After Kyle determined the design idea of energy, the progress bar of the energy branch jumped to 20%. The statistics of this type of project by the Goldfinger are not just the design of the drawings. Instead, the progress bar will jump to 100% after the design documents are prepared and a prototype, or the test machine, is produced. Similarly, the system will give feedback every time the progress bar advances 10%. When the design drawings and theoretical research account for a large proportion of this 10%, the system's feedback will tend to be related to the project's knowledge and perception, and when the actual operation part accounts for a large proportion, it will become different operating techniques, different operating methods, and details that can improve efficiency. The energy source of the magic puppet is divided into 2 parts. One part comes from the magic energy that is usually absorbed by itself from the natural world, that is, the inert energy mentioned above. The other part comes from the user's own magic power. Considering that the magic power of the little wizard is relatively weak, Kyle needs to design the magic loop to be more powerful. Only when 1 point of magic power can be used to produce 2 points or even 3 points of effect, can the toy puppet have a long battery life. Although the flying broom can be used for reference in this regard, the utilization requirements of both are still relatively large. So Kyle still needs to modify a lot of places. First of all, the magic absorption part needs to be improved. This part is consistent with the requirements of the energy storage room, which can be used as a technical reserve for improving the energy storage room. As for the absorption and conversion of wizard magic power, there is no need to make too many modifications. The flying broom has done a great job here. The biggest difference is the energy output part. Because the flying broom pursues faster instantaneous acceleration and higher maximum speed, it appears extremely wild and violent in the output part. In Kyle's eyes, its magic loop reveals a wild beauty. The toy puppet pursues a smooth and stable output and does not require instantaneous large amounts of energy output, which makes the design of magic words much easier. If Kyle wants to be lazy, he only needs to add a set of restrictive magic words on the basis of the flying broom loop. It is equivalent to adding a speed limiter to a Ferrari. But Kyle's purpose of producing toy puppets is not only to make money, but also to practice the knowledge he has mastered. In the process of production, he tried some immature ideas to make a technical reserve for Kyle's formal research project. So Kyle decided to redesign this part by himself. For the magic circuit of energy output, Kyle has mastered enough basic knowledge, but he lacks an opportunity to practice. Borrowing the framework of the magic circuit of the flying broom, Kyle began his own design journey. Deletion, addition, replacement, filling. The original simple circuit framework gradually became complicated. A large number of magic symbols filled the period. Several simple magic words form the basic unit, and then link the magic units in different ways to form a magic circuit. And this is only the basic element of the magic circle of the toy puppet. It is also necessary to cooperate with alchemy to make a qualified energy storage core. The days passed peacefully. It took Kyle nearly a month to get the magic circle of the energy storage part. With the help of alchemy, the first energy storage core sample was produced. Since the system will constantly feed back various insights, after absorbing them, Kyle will go back and modify the completed design drawings. This has led to Kyle's efficiency not being able to improve. but during the entire design and production process, Kyle's gains are definitely far greater than the efforts of this month. Knowledge gained from books is shallow, and you must practice to know it. Before this, Kyle's research on magic runes and alchemy was mostly on paper. At most, he made some small gadgets to practice. This is the first time that he has fully applied the knowledge he has mastered. And because it is a semi-autonomous design, the use of knowledge has become more flexible. Various knowledge is connected in series. When mentioning a piece of knowledge, you can think of its related usage and related theories. At this point, Kyle has officially embarked on the road of magic research, rather than just staying on paper. The main body of the energy storage part is a hollow sphere. It is made of excellent wrought iron purchased from the Muggle world, fused with green milestone, colored pearls, and yellow crystal powder, supplemented by a very small amount of mithril. The final product is relatively strong, and the magic conduction characteristics also fully meet the requirements of use. There were densely packed magic runes engraved on it. These magic runes formed the final magic circle from dots to lines, and from lines to surfaces. The main function of this part was to absorb and store energy, and was named the Magic Sphere by Kyle. Kyle injected magic power into it. As the magic power was injected, the magic runes engraved on the sphere first emitted a faint blue light. Then the entire sphere was filled with this faint light. As the magic power in the sphere filled up, it slowly broke free from Kyle's palm and floated up. The faint blue light radiated to a position about 20 centimeters above the sphere. The sphere floated about 50 centimeters above Kyle's palm, and due to the flow of internal magic power, it slowly rotated. At this time, Kyle in the room stretched out his left hand, his right hand drooped naturally, and his eyes were fixed on the magic sphere. The big silver dog also came over, also staring at the magic sphere with his eyes, analyzing its advantages and disadvantages. After a long time, Kyle finally recovered from the excitement of making the first finished product, and was reluctant to put away the magic sphere. At this time, Kyle looked like a child of 14 or 15 years old. After the magic ball was refined, Kyle's research and development progress suddenly increased a lot. After that, Kyle spent another 2 weeks to get the protection module. This part was designed by Kyle very well. After all, once there is a problem with safety, other products developed by Kyle in the future will be affected. Kyle, who has been in the business world for nearly 10 years in his previous life, knows very well how much effort, time, and even how much money are needed to build a reputation. But the collapse of reputation may only take a short night. For the design ideas of this part, Kyle believes that it should not be limited to providing sufficient protection for the little wizard to avoid injury when playing. It should also have the ability to provide shelter for the little wizard in critical moments. This will also become a signature feature of the toy puppet. For the magic array used in this part, Kyle borrowed a lot of existing protective arrays. These arrays are often used to guard secret rooms and manors. In addition, borrowing from the life-saving skills of the wizard in the game in the previous life, Kyle installed a piece of non-melting ice in the protection module. Once all the protective arrays fail, the module will activate this piece of non-melting ice. The expansion spell makes it bigger, and the shaping spell makes it spread along the cockpit, eventually forming a solid non-melting ice barrier that wraps the cockpit. Kyle named it the ice barrier. The significance of the barrier is not only to isolate the young wizard from danger, but also to buy enough time for the young wizard to wait for rescue. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Farce. Time passed quietly with Kyle's research, and it was Halloween Eve in a blink of an eye. Many interesting things happened during this period. Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff played a Quidditch game. Thanks to the excellent performance of the Seeker, Hufflepuff won a perfect victory. Just when Ravenclaw scored 4 goals, Cedric Diggory caught the golden snitch and ended the game. The final score was 170:40, and Hufflepuff won a big victory. It is said that Hufflepuff held a grand celebration banquet in the lounge that night, and many Gryffindor lions also participated in it. In addition, Potter and Malfoy had several conflicts again, and the two sides had friendly exchanges including, but not limited to quarrels, confrontations, pushing, and fighting. The only thing that Kyle regretted was that since neither side used magic, no one was put in detention. After class in the afternoon, when Kyle passed by the auditorium, he found that the professors were already decorating the auditorium. Professor Flitwick used a spell to turn the ceiling into a dark cloud with thunder and lightning. Professor McGonagall used a transfiguration spell to turn the wall decorations into skulls, spider webs and other decorations that fit the festive atmosphere. The most exaggerated was Hagrid, who actually brought several pumpkin lanterns that were more than one person tall and piled them in the corner. They were densely packed on the walls and ceilings, and there were probably more than 1,000 live bats circling constantly. Other bats flew up and down, and the vibration of their wings made the candlelight flicker. Some bats swarmed onto the table, and from a distance they looked like a large dark cloud. Obviously, the arrival of the festival made the professors quite happy. The extroverted Professor Flitwick cast spells while chatting with the little wizards and listening to their requests, and Professor McGonagall, even Kyle thought he had heard it wrong. Kyle actually heard Professor McGonagall humming a little tune. After resting in the dormitory for a while, Kyle changed into a new robe and walked towards the hall. Headmaster Dumbledore, McGonagall and many other professors were already sitting on the podium waiting for the banquet to begin. Like every year, Professor Snape was not among them. Considering the professor's personality of not allowing strangers to enter, it is normal for him to be averse to such occasions. In previous banquets, Professor Snape was usually the last to arrive, and after a simple meal, he would be the first to leave. However, this year, there was one more professor who did not attend in advance like Snape. It was the new defense against the dark arts professor, Quirinus Quirrell. Speaking of this defense against the dark arts professor, he has become a joke in the school. He stutters and is timid when speaking. He dares not look the other person in the face when talking, and his eyes are evasive. He reads from the textbook in class, and it seems that he intends to read the textbook aloud in one school year. In addition, he smells of garlic all over his body, and this senior who graduated from Ravenclaw has a very bad reputation in the school. However, Kyle has a different view of Professor Quirrell. At the beginning of the school year, Kyle had enjoyed the smell of garlic and asked him a few questions. After all, to be a professor at Hogwarts, he must have some skills. Poor performance in class can only prove that he is not good at teaching, but it cannot deny his magic level. The result of the test was beyond Kyle's expectations. When Kyle asked about the spell of defense, Professor Quirrell just repeated the explanation of the spell in the textbook. He did not have his own opinions, and his repetition was chaotic and unclear, with a sentence from here and there. However, when Kyle asked about the dark magic, Professor Quirrell explained a few sentences casually. Although he was still timid, and after 2 or 3 sentences, he immediately changed the topic. Kyle heard in these 2 or 3 short sentences that Professor Quirrell had a unique insight into this spell. After that, Kyle asked several questions related to the dark magic. Although it was not something that was forbidden to learn, it was also a borderline. But unfortunately, Kyle never got any useful advice again. It seemed that the previous explanation was just a product of Quirrell's sudden inspiration. After that, Kyle started his own research and stopped exploring this issue. Soon, Dumbledore announced the start of the dinner. Professor Snape also walked into the hall a few minutes before the dinner started. His cold face and impatient eyes all showed the professor's disgust for the banquet. He was obviously disgusted by this useless thing that disturbed the professor from brewing potions. Kyle secretly joked about his dean in his heart while picking up a piece of pumpkin pie. Before Kyle could eat it, he saw Professor Quirrell stumbling into the hall. The large purple scarf he usually wrapped around his head was now worn crookedly on his head. His pale and thin face was full of fear. Everyone watched him run to Headmaster Dumbledore, hold the table, and scream breathlessly, "Trolls in the dungeon, I thought you should know." Then he fell to the floor and fainted. His voice was not loud, but the whole hall was boiling. The students were in a mess. Some even screamed loudly, rushing to the door and trying to squeeze out. The whole hall was in chaos. Quiet Dumbledore stood up calmly and shot sparks with his wand. Everyone quieted down and looked at him. "Prefect, take the students from each house to the dormitory immediately. Follow me, Hufflepuff students, don't get separated." The prefects began to organize the evacuation, and the chaotic crowd gradually became orderly. The first to react were Hufflepuffs. Kyle followed Slytherin into the cellar, thinking about the farce just now. Yes, it was a farce. A brainless troll could break in. When did Hogwarts defense become so weak? There was obviously something that Kyle didn't know about. And Professor Quirrell, whether it was his occasional outrageous behavior in front of Kyle or the rumor that he had ventured into the dark forest on the border of Albania alone before school started, it seemed to imply that this professor was extraordinary. Such a person, but was scared by a troll? Oh, no. Hermione. What? Hermione. Hermione is still crying in the girls' bathroom over in the dungeon. She doesn't know about the troll. Kyle heard this conversation and then was bumped by two little brats. It was the savior Potter and the little red-haired boy beside him. They did not follow the prefect to the lounge, but instead took advantage of the chaos to run to the classroom below. The reckless Gryffindor did not notice that half of the Slytherin saw them rushing to the dungeon. However, the indifferent little snakes did not care about the lives of others, not to mention that it was the golden boy of their mortal enemy Gryffindor. The little snakes were happy to let the troll try out the quality of the savior. Kyle looked at the scene in front of him, squinted his eyes and thought for a while. He reached out and touched his pocket, then nodded to the prefect, turned around and walked in the direction where Potter left. Chapter 16. Protection Module and Giant Monster. Not long after walking, Kyle heard footsteps behind him. In order to avoid trouble, Kyle dodged and hid behind a lion-headed eagle statue. Embarrassingly, the golden boy and red-haired Weasley also hid here. Weasley stared at Kyle and was about to question Kyle, but Potter, who also heard footsteps behind him, quickly blocked his mouth. With a slight smile, Kyle ignored the two little brats, took out his wand and tapped himself, and the disillusionment charm was released on himself. Then a wave appeared on Kyle's body, like a stone thrown into a calm lake, and then slowly became transparent, and finally merged with the environment, and disappeared in front of Potter and Weasley. "This is simply cheating," Redhead muttered softly, and then tried to shrink behind the statue. The person who followed Kyle in was not Professor Lodge as he guessed. After all, his performance just now was too exaggerated. Instead, it was his own dean, Professor Snape. The professor ran quickly through the corridor and disappeared from their sight. "Where is he going?" Potter whispered. "Why doesn't he go to the underground classroom with the other teachers?" As he said that, he looked in Kyle's direction warily. "Follow him." The red-haired man also glanced at Kyle, but still gritted his teeth and said. Following Professor Snape, they tiptoed to another corridor. "He seems to be going to the third floor," Potter said, but Weasley suddenly grabbed his hand tightly. "Do you smell a strange smell?" Potter sniffed hard, and a foul smell rushed into his nostrils. The smell was like old socks that had not been washed for several years and the stench of a public toilet that no one had ever cleaned. In fact, Kyle smelled this smell as soon as he came to this corridor and saw the troll standing at the left corner at the end of the corridor. It seemed that the noise made by Potter and Weasley aroused the curiosity of the troll. With the heavy footsteps of a pair of giant feet and a low gurgling sound from the throat, the huge figure walked towards the direction of the two little devils. The two huddled together in the shadow of the corner, watching the huge monster slowly exposed in the moonlight. The troll was 12 feet tall, with dark skin, like grey granite. The bloated body was like a large pebble, with a bald head as small as a coconut shell on it. The two short legs were thicker than the trunks of trees, and the flat feet were covered with calluses. The disgusting smell came from this monster. The monster held a huge wooden stick in his hand. Because his hands were too long, the stick dragged on the ground, making a loud noise. Fortunately, the troll did not continue to walk towards the two people. He stopped beside a door and peeked into the door to see something. The monster listened for a long time and seemed to have finally made up his mind. He lowered his head and slowly walked into the room. "We can lock it in the room," Potter whispered. "Good idea." Weasley looked quite nervous. After the two finished talking, they looked around and then ran to the women's bathroom. As Potter ran, he shouted to the air, "Are you still there? Can you make us invisible too?" Seeing no response, the red-haired man said indignantly, "Damn, Slytherin is really unreliable. This coward must have slipped away." As soon as he saw the troll, they approached the open door gently. Potter gritted his teeth, rushed forward and pulled out the key, slammed the door hard, and locked it quickly. "Oh, it's done." The two people were so excited that their faces turned red. They turned around and ran back to the passage. Just as they were about to run to the first corner, a scream came from behind. "Hermione!" The two shouted loudly. Then they turned around and ran straight back to the door of the room, turned the key, and mustered their greatest courage. Potter pushed the door open with force. Without thinking, they rushed in. Seeing the two little brats rushing in, Kyle cancelled the disillusionment charm. "Reckless, brainless and impulsive," Kyle commented. Although he said so, Kyle's upturned mouth corners revealed his good mood. After all, not everyone, especially after seeing the giant monster's strength, has the courage to charge at it. Although the little snakes are extremely loyal to the friendship they recognize, their introverted and arrogant personalities obviously make them more cautious and picky in choosing such friendships. After staying in Slytherin for a long time, I saw more of the indifference and selfishness shown by the little snakes. In contrast, the scene in front of me seemed more and more pleasing. It's worthy of being a Gryffindor. Listening to the troll making more and more noise in the women's bathroom, Kyle paced and walked into the women's bathroom with a relaxed demeanor. At this time, Potter was confronting the giant monster and trying to fight it. He threw a stone at the giant monster to attract his attention, and then was chased and beaten by the giant monster. The girl with fluffy hair seemed to be called Hermione. She stood motionless against the wall, opened her mouth, and seemed to be so scared that she couldn't say a word. The red-haired man was shouting beside him, trying to attract the troll's attention, but the effect was not obvious. "Good evening, ma'am, and the two gentlemen. I hope I didn't disturb your fun with the troll," Kyle teased. "Damn, you evil Slytherin, what are you doing sneaking around here?" Ron nervously picked up a stone and threw it at the troll while shouting to Kyle, "Help Harry, please help Harry, you must have a way, right?" The little girl named Hermione reacted quickly. Seeing Kyle's calm expression, she immediately asked Kyle. Kyle didn't say much and took out a huge cloth bag from his pocket. The opening of the cloth bag was nearly 2 meters in diameter. He held the cloth bag upside down and shook it for a while, and then a huge oval-shaped thing with bursts of magical light fell out. There was a round hole as high as a person on it, and you could see that it was hollow inside. This is a toy puppet protection module that Kyle had just made recently, and the position of the cockpit has been reserved. This bag casts the traceless extension charm. Of course, please keep it a secret for me. Seeing the two young wizards' eyes widened, he explained briefly. The traceless extension charm is a high-level spell and is strictly controlled by the Ministry of Magic. Theoretically, 100 wizards who are proficient in this spell can squeeze into a small toilet cubicle, and the possibility of violating the International Statute of Wizarding secrecy is obvious. The Ministry of Magic has therefore made strict regulations on this spell. The traceless extension charm cannot be used for private purposes, but can only be used for the production of individual items approved by the relevant Ministry of Magic, such as school suitcases and family tents. Then, Kyle used the levitation charm to make the protective module float up and fly towards Potter. "Hide in it," Kyle said to Potter. At this time, Potter had been blocked in the corner by the troll and had nowhere to escape. Hearing this, he had to grit his teeth and drill through the reserved round hole. Potter had just drilled into the module and hid, and the huge wooden stick followed. No. Obviously Hermione and Red Hair didn't think the strange device Kyle took out was useful, and it didn't even look as thick as the bathroom partition. Hermione covered her face and screamed, while Ron put down the stone in his hand in despair. To Kyle's surprise, he rushed towards the troll with a sad face. Before the two of them stopped screaming, with the sudden arrival of the wooden stick, the magic light on the protection module flashed, and a layer of transparent cover was formed. The troll's wooden stick only hit the cover and made it dented, and then it had no power left. The magical scene made the three little ghosts open their mouths in surprise. I even fell to the ground because of the excessive inertia of the forward rush. "What on earth do you want to do?" At this time, an angry voice came from behind Kyle. Professor McGonagall's expression was extremely unfriendly, and her voice was terrible. Kyle even heard the sound of the three little ghosts swallowing their saliva. Chapter 17. Protection Module and Giant Monster. Professor McGonagall just waved her hand, and the gravel and wood chips on the ground turned into ropes, entangled the troll, before it could react. With a loud bang, the troll fell to the ground. Obviously, the troll's little head, which was not much bigger than a coconut, couldn't figure out what happened. It howled furiously and struggled hard, but it was obvious that the ropes that McGonagall had transformed with transfiguration were not something the troll could break free of. What on earth do you want to do? Professor McGonagall's roar followed. Good evening, Professor. Kyle bowed. Good evening, Professor. Good evening, good evening. The three little brats also greeted the professor. Among them, the little red-haired one seemed to have broken his mouth when he fell just now. He covered his mouth and spoke vaguely. Professor McGonagall looked at the few people. Her lips were pale, and the little brats had obviously never seen her so angry. Before Professor McGonagall could continue questioning them, Professor Dumbledore and Professor Sprout, head of Hufflepuff and professor of herbology, filed in, and the originally empty female bathroom became a little crowded. Kyle noticed that after many professors came in, Professor Snape also walked in quietly, followed by Professor Quirrell. Quirrell, who came in last, only glanced at the troll, and then sobbed weakly, sitting on a toilet, clutching his chest tightly. Professor Snape first glanced at Kyle indifferently, and then stared at Potter. As expected of the famous savior, it is obvious that the dull school life cannot provide you with the opportunity to show off, so you decided to bring your own followers to challenge the troll? And you, Mr. Shafiq, it seems that you have also thrown yourself into the arms of the savior and become the savior's little follower? You old. Of course not, Professor. Before the red-haired Weasley finished speaking, the little girl interrupted his thoughtless words. Please don't do this. Professor McGonagall, they are looking for me. Miss Granger. Hermione finally struggled to stand up. I came to find the troll, because I thought I could deal with it alone, you know, because I read about them in books, and know them very well. Kyle put his hands behind his back, and sneered at Miss Granger's lies. Kyle heard Potter say with his own ears, that Granger was crying in the girls' bathroom, and didn't know about the troll. Weasley put down his wand. Together with the two little brats Potter, he tried his best to pretend that he was already familiar with this story. If they hadn't found me, I would have been dead by now. Harry attracted the troll's attention, making it very angry and chasing him. Ron tried hard to divert the troll's attention, but it seemed that the troll only had Harry in its eyes. They didn't have time to look for anyone. When they arrived, the troll was about to swallow me up. As she said that, the little girl looked at Kyle with gratitude. It's this Slytherin gentleman. Kyle Shafiq. Kyle introduced himself to the little girl with a smile. It was this Mr. Shafiq who arrived in time and saved Harry. Oh, if that's the case. Professor McGonagall looked at them and pondered. Miss Granger, you silly girl, how can you think you can deal with a troll as big as a mountain alone? Then Mr. Shafiq, can you explain why you are here? Then Professor McGonagall looked at Kyle, but her attitude was much softer. This is an interesting story, Professor. Kyle glanced at the three little brats with a wicked look. Granger and Potter both looked at Kyle with pitiful expressions, as if they were desperately saying to Kyle with their eyes, help, help. Only the little red-haired boy seemed to have a bad brain, and he secretly picked up a brick. Rolling his eyes secretly, Kyle smiled and said to the professor, I accidentally saw three little lions. I saw three Gryffindors. Seeing Professor McGonagall frowned, Kyle had to change his words. I saw three Gryffindors walking this way. Out of curiosity, I followed them. I have to praise their courage and friendship, Professor, although the process was full of brainlessness and recklessness. Okay, Professor, let me tell you the point. Although a few little brats seem to have forgotten that they were wizards in the process, but overall, their spirit is commendable. Kyle felt that his summary was quite on point, but it seemed that neither the three brats nor Professor McGonagall were satisfied. Only Professor Snape nodded in agreement. Sure enough, his own dean was still friendly. Seeing that the little red-haired boy actually raised the brick he had just put down, Kyle raised his eyebrows. This little guy is quite courageous. How long has it been since he was provoked like this? This little red-haired boy's addicted to provoking me, right? It's the second or third time. It's time to consider the plan to mess with his brother, Kyle thought, squinting at the little red-haired boy. Mr. Shafiq, thank you for your comments, but it seems that this does not explain why you are here. I think your story is what we want to hear more. Dumbledore interrupted without waiting for Professor McGonagall to continue asking. That's right, you cunning and evil Slytherin. What are you doing secretly following us? Did you let the troll in? The little red-haired boy was indignant, jumping up and down and shouting. Although Potter didn't say anything, his expression was quite in agreement. Hearing this, Professor McGonagall and Granger's expressions were full of embarrassment, and the professor's eyes twitched slightly. It seems that there are not many smart people in Gryffindor. Well, first of all, thank you Mr. Weasley for your wonderful speech, but I hope you can remember that I saved Potter before you speak. I'm just curious about how a troll got into Hogwarts, which is known as the safest and most tightly guarded. After all, I have to live here for another 3.5 years, and I have to find out the reason to feel at ease. Obviously hearing Kyle's perfunctory words, Dumbledore didn't say much, but replied, of course, Mr. Shafiq, Hogwarts is always the safest. This is just an accident. The professor's experiments ran out. You can live and study in Hogwarts with confidence. In addition, Mr. Shafiq, don't you introduce this oval-shaped cabin to us? It seems that this thing protected Harry. Obviously, old Dumbledore was more interested in this thing that he had obviously never seen before, and he looked at Kyle with a smile. My pleasure, Professor. Kyle bowed slightly to the professors. Dumbledore pretended to listen attentively and waved his hand, motioning Kyle to continue the introduction. Professor Snape, on the other hand, looked impatient, staring at Potter with a frown. This is part of my latest research, Professor. In fact, I hope that the young wizards can have one each, because the troll has just proved his excellent protective ability. Kyle introduced it to the professors with a smile that was decent and elegant. With the performance of the protection module in withstanding the troll's attack today, and the gimmick of protecting the savior from being smashed into a meat paste by the troll, Kyle believed that he no longer had to worry about the market for his toy puppets. Chapter 18, Galleons and Puppet Test. Excellent design. Mr. Shafiq, you said this is only part of the design work. Can you introduce it in detail? In addition, because of this excellent design, Slytherin adds 10 points. Dumbledore said. Thank you, Professor. Then, Kyle introduced his toy puppet to the professors and the three little lions. Potter and Red Hair were obviously very interested and listened very eagerly. Before Kyle finished introducing, Red Hair couldn't wait to jump out. Kyle. Mr. Kyle Shafiq, how much does your toy puppet sell for? Red Hair obviously forgot the provocation just now. However, Kyle didn't mind that Red Hair called his name wrong, but smiled at Red Hair badly. The basic model is only 2,800 galleons. Mr. Weasley, of course, the customized version will be more expensive. Obviously, the economic status of Red Hair's family is not within the scope of Kyle's customers. However, Potter's parents seem to have left him a lot of inheritance, which can be seen from the fact that he bought a broomstick for 2,000 when he entered school. Kyle didn't know that the flying broom was given to Potter by Professor McGonagall. You should know that the price of the 2,000 UN Nimbus is as high as 2,200 galleons. Compared with the 2,000 UN Nimbus, Kyle's toy puppet is not inferior in design, and it can be used as a life-saving protective gear at a critical moment. It is also said that Nimbus is developing a new flying broom named Firebolt, which is scheduled to be priced at 5,000 galleons, so Kyle did not think that his price was too high. Hearing this price, the red-haired man closed his mouth in despair and looked at Kyle with the eyes of a class enemy. Well, Mr. Shafiq, the product you designed is undoubtedly excellent, but this price does not seem to guarantee that every little wizard will have one. Dumbledore said to Kyle with a strange look on his face. It doesn't matter. The little wizards can't afford it. The school can equip them for the little wizards. After all, the school directors are very rich, right, Professor Dumbledore? I believe you can convince the school directors to agree. After all, there has just been a troll invasion, and the school director should pay attention to the safety of the little wizards at school. Kyle said happily, and did not forget to stab Dumbledore. Okay, don't talk about these nonsense, Mr. Weirlie, Miss Know-It-All, and the Great Savior. Please return to the lounge immediately. Don't let me catch you staying outside, otherwise I don't mind locking you up. And you, Mr. Shafiq, I believe your product promotion meeting is over. Please return to the cellar immediately. Obviously, Professor Snape was impatient with the wrangling in front of him. Okay, Professor. After saying that, Kyle left the women's bathroom first. Then the three little brats came out together. Then good night, three of you. Kyle said goodbye to the three Gryffindors happily, and turned to the cellar. The next day, as Kyle expected, everything that happened the night before had been spread to the 4 colleges. Wherever he went, there would be little wizards gathered together, dancing and discussing the story of the little wizards fighting the troll. Kyle even saw the little red hare telling others about his heroic deeds more than once with saliva splashing. What about actively charging at the troll? What about not having the slightest fear, throwing stones at the troll to attract his attention, etc.? But it seems that these 2 sentences are the only ones heard. As the story spreads, Kyle became more famous in the school. For the little wizards, saving the savior is simply a legend that only happens in their dreams. Kyle actually enjoyed the treatment of groups of junior wizards circling around him, but this obviously made Kyle very distressed. At the same time, Kyle's unreleased toy puppets also received great attention. After all, no one will ever think that magic armor is too little. As a last resort, Kyle could only explain to the little wizards over and over again that the work was not yet completed and it would take some time to see the finished product. But this could not resist the enthusiasm of the little wizards at all. Kyle has received as many as 30 pre-orders. Don't think it's an exaggeration. For the nobles, 2,800 galleons is really nothing. According to Malfoy, he has persuaded his father to donate 5 Nimbus 2001s to Slytherin College, worth 10,000 galleons. The purpose is just to allow Slytherin to fight against Potter's Nimbus 2000. These nobles with a long history may not know how many galleons they have, except for Weirlie. Of course, the Malfoy family may do this just to get Malfoy into the Slytherin school team. After all, Quidditch captain Marcus Flint has publicly announced that Malfoy will definitely join the school team next year. After dealing with these trivial matters, Kyle plunged into research. Flight module, control system, sound, and light effects, including voice recognition and body production added later. As the technology became more and more sophisticated, the progress of research and development became faster and faster. All research and development work was completed within 1.5 months, and the finished product was produced before the Christmas holiday. The next day, Kyle, who had no classes in the afternoon, came to the Quidditch field. The bright sunshine made the little wizards unwilling to stay in the cold castle, and they appeared in groups on the field. Ignoring the little wizards playing around, Kyle took out the cloth bag with the traceless expansion spell, and poured out the prototype. Kyle was speechless about this way of carrying, but he really couldn't spare more energy to study this recently. Including the toy puppet in the shape of Baymax that Kyle added later, there are a total of 5 prototypes. Before Kyle used the floating spell to place the 5 prototypes, the little wizards around had already gathered around. Is this a toy puppet? So majestic. Oh my god, he's so tall. Look at that. So cute. Looks so warm. Kyle didn't even need to demonstrate it in public. The little wizards were already conquered by the appearance of the toy puppet. Although 4 of the appearances have withstood the test of time in later generations, and have been proven to be 4 excellent appearance designs. After all, this is the magic world of the 1990s, and Kyle cannot guarantee that this appearance, that transcends the aesthetics of the times by more than 10 or 20 years, will be accepted. To be honest, Kyle has made preparations to adjust the appearance, and even completely adopt the traditional appearance of magic puppets, although Kyle thinks that look is too old-fashioned. However, the feedback from the little wizards on the scene made Kyle feel a lot more at ease. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce my latest research results, toy puppets. Seeing that more and more little wizards were watching, Kyle simply treated this test as a product launch conference. testing and promoting at the same time. I believe you have heard of my toy puppets and have some understanding of them. Then first, I will demonstrate the effect of remote control of toy puppets. After speaking, the Gundam puppet and the steampunk puppet raised their thighs as high as a person and stepped out. Chapter 19, Galleons and Puppet Test. With Kyle's command, the two puppets started a fierce battle. From punching and kicking each other, to releasing their own sound and light magic. The visual effect is perfect. Kyle designed basic skills for each puppet, such as straight punch, heavy punch, light kick and heavy kick, etc. At the same time, if the basic skills are released in a certain order, a combination of skills and special moves can be released. Yes, Kyle copied the ideas of the previous King of Fighters and Street Fighter. The performance looks very passionate. The battle is fist to flesh, supplemented by dazzling sound and light magic, making the scene look very intense. For safety reasons, Kyle chose a variable material for the outer shell of the puppet. Usually, this material is extremely hard, but after the magic power is input into it at a certain frequency and circuit, this material will become extremely soft. Taking advantage of this special property, Kyle drew a special magic circle at the bottom of the puppet shell, in addition to drawing magic circles such as hardness and increased magic resistance. Once the puppet detects that the shell is about to collide with humans, it will activate this magic circle, making the puppet shell soften instantly and become a flexible material. At most, it will bounce the person who accidentally touches it and make him fall, but there will be no more serious injuries. As for why he didn't just keep the lethality of the toy puppet, Kyle could only say that the water here is too deep and Kyle couldn't grasp it. However, the little wizard was very satisfied with the scene in front of him. The passionate fighting and the gorgeous effects were no less attractive than the arcade to teenagers in the past. In addition, this is a physical and controllable one, which is even more attractive. The enthusiastic scene in front of him has made Kyle see that the gold galleons will bury him. After the remote control demonstration, it was the turn of the real person operation. In order to better promote his products, Kyle decided to choose the operator from the little wizards on the scene to experience the actual operation. Thank you for your approval, gentlemen and ladies. Next is another way to play with toy puppets, which is also an unprecedented way to play with toys of the same type, real person control. Which gentleman or lady is interested in becoming the first tester? Undoubtedly, this proposal was warmly cheered by the little animals present, and they actively signed up for Kyle. In the end, Kyle chose Cedric Diggory from Hufflepuff, the Weir Lightwinds from Gryffindor, Qiu Zhang, a second-year girl from Ravenclaw, and Daphne Greengrass, a junior from his own college. Okay, gentlemen and ladies, choose a puppet you like and use your wand to connect your magic power to the puppet. After several little wizards had chosen their own puppets, Kyle continued to command, next, order your puppets to open the hatch. At this time, the shells of the belly parts of several puppets were separated from other parts and slowly flattened, turning into a ladder connecting the ground and the cockpit, indicating the 5 little wizards to enter the cockpit. Kyle cast a loud voice on himself. Okay, students, please step back. The young wizards stepped back obediently, leaving enough space, and Kyle began to teach the 5 young wizards how to use it. 5 students, you can see that the cockpit has a 360-degree field of view, so you can look in different directions at will. At the same time, the actual operation mode cancels the preset actions, and the puppets will give real-time feedback on the actions of the gentlemen and ladies, whether it is lifting a leg, punching, or any other actions. But if the students can reproduce the various combination skills just shown by the puppets, then the corresponding sound and light effects will also appear. Okay, the operation is very simple. Please feel free to test it. Several young wizards who could not hold back decisively began their own experiments. From simple kicking and punching to running and jumping, as expected. After just a simple familiarity, the Weasley brothers took advantage of Cedric's inattention and pounced on him together. But unfortunately, due to the unskilled operation, it soon turned into 3 people hugging each other and rolling and wrestling on the ground, and it was not a 2-on-1 fight between the Weasley brothers, but a melee of 3 people. It was obvious that the three of them had gone crazy, and they were not familiar with the preset combination skills, so they did not trigger any sound and light effects. Although the scene was exciting and lively, it was a bit monotonous. Looking at the two girls, Qiu Zhang chose the puppet in the shape of the minions, while Daphne happily walked to the puppet in the shape of Baymax. The two girls cautiously began to move forward, and it was obvious that they took a little longer to adapt than the boys. However, their cautious appearance, combined with the cute appearance of the two puppets, made them even more adorable. The operation of the toy puppets was simple, and the two girls quickly manipulated the puppets to run around. Considering that these two puppets were originally launched for girls, the conditions for achieving the sound and light effects were much simpler than the other three. Soon, the two girls figured out some simple ways to use the sound and light effects. It must be said that regardless of whether Daphne's personality was arrogant or not, the aristocratic education she had experienced was indeed not to be underestimated. After simply getting familiar with the conditions of the sound and light effects of Baymax, Daphne actually quickly compiled a simple dance based on these movements. Due to the structure of Baymax, Daphne's movements are relatively simple, but with Baymax's cute appearance, the effect of this dance exploded instantly. Baymax waved his hands and kicked his legs, or spun and jumped, and colorful magic light effects flashed on his body. As soon as the dance began, Baymax became the center of the entire court, attracting everyone's attention. Maybe the little wizards present will have many more exciting and unforgettable experiences in the future, but I believe that the scene in front of them will become one of the most unforgettable memories of their school life. It is the kind of beautiful moment that will still smile when you recall it occasionally after the ignorant youth. Maybe it is because of the difference in the college, or maybe it is out of jealousy. Kyle can hear a few strange words such as the movements are too simple and really love to show off from time to time, but looking at the expressions of most of the little wizards around, both men and women are immersed in this dazzling performance. With Daphne's outstanding appearance and excellent family, I believe that after this performance, Daphne will become one of the most popular girls in the school. With a gently rotating ending action, Baymax stopped. Before the magic light faded, the cockpit door slowly opened. The sun had already set close to the horizon, and the warm yellow sunlight shone from Daphne's side and back, shining through her long golden hair. With the magic light effect that slowly dissipated, but still left traces, Daphne, who was panting slightly, was dazzling at this moment. The little girl, with the inherent pride and elegance of the nobility, lifted her skirt to thank the people around her, and walked towards Kyle with her head held high. A wonderful performance, Miss Greengrass. I believe this performance will become an unforgettable memory for the audience present. Without waiting for Daphne to speak, Kyle took the initiative to step forward and praised her. My pleasure, senior. Call me Daphne. Your designs are equally impressive. I can't wait to have a toy puppet of my own. How long do we have to wait? It may take some time for the toy puppet to be officially produced and sold, but Daphne, I wonder if you are interested in collecting the puppet you just tried? I want to give you this prototype as a gift to thank you for your wonderful performance just now. Kyle pointed at Baymax and said to Daphne with a smile. Hearing this, Daphne was obviously very happy. She smiled and gave Kyle a skirt lifting salute, and the joy in her eyes overflowed. Typing is really hard work. Long hours at the desk cause stiff and sore muscles. Did you think I asked for collection and recommendation? No. As smart as I am, I immediately placed an order to buy an aerobic boxing. I can only say that this game is really good. Chapter 20 Christmas and the Invisibility Cloak. Half a month has passed since the last public demonstration. Thanks to his many friends in Slytherin College, Kyle easily found the manufacturer and seller of the toy puppet. It has to be said that Slytherin is really a big family with a lot of fun, and the seniors never bully the juniors. When one side is in trouble, all sides support it. Knowing that Kyle was worried about not having a manufacturer and seller to connect with, the little wizards of various families recommended their families to take over this business. In order to help Kyle, there were even fights between little wizards. Such a warm scene really warmed Kyle. In the end, Quidditch captain Marcus Flint won the production rights with his hard fists, while Draco Malfoy won the sales rights with his excellent business channels. The final result of the discussion was that Kyle was only responsible for technical guidance and took 20% of the net profit. This method is the best method that Kyle thought of after careful consideration. It will not take up too much of Kyle's time, and it can quickly occupy the market. You must know that the most valuable part of Kyle's toy puppet is actually creativity. As for technology, others can imitate it quickly. If Kyle produced and sold the toys himself, Kyle might have just finished the Hogwarts order when pirated toy puppets filled other markets. You know, there is no intellectual property protection law in the magic world. Choosing this model, you only need to explain the design ideas and precautions in the early stage of production, and the rest can be easily handled by Flint and the Malfoy family. As for the final profit, Kyle felt that he already had 100,000 gold galleons in his pocket. Although Kyle's plan to make money was going smoothly, after dealing with all these disturbances, Kyle couldn't get too excited these 2 days. Christmas is coming soon. Kyle is an orphan in Two Lives. The more he gets to this kind of reunion festival, the more depressed Kyle is. The previous life was Mid-Autumn Festival, and this life is Christmas. The reunion of people around him will only make Kyle more lonely. Being a stranger in a foreign land, Kyle misses his relatives every time during the holidays, but he doesn't even have relatives to miss. As the little wizards boarded the train home, the castle became more and more gloomy. Wandering in the castle, there was hardly anyone to be seen, only ghosts passing by from time to time. But Kyle did not continue to study his portable energy storage room after finishing the development of the puppet toy, but gave himself 2 days off. In the morning, he went to the library to read interesting essays and travel notes, and returned to the dormitory to rest in the afternoon. Sometimes he went to the kitchen in the basement to ask the house elf for a cup of black tea and a dessert, and slept by the fireplace for an entire afternoon. After dinner, he found an empty classroom to practice spells, and spent the day leisurely. On Christmas Day, Kyle had nothing to do all day, until the evening, when he went to the auditorium to attend the Christmas dinner held by the school. Speaking of being single, it has almost become a tradition at Hogwarts. From Dumbledore to the deans of various colleges, to professors of various subjects, all are single. There are not many little wizards who stay in school for Christmas. In the end, the Christmas dinner looked like a party for faculty and staff at Hogwarts. After a quick bite at the dinner, Kyle left the auditorium and found an abandoned magic practice room to practice spells today. Because he was in a bad mood, Kyle used a lot of powerful and uncontrollable magic to vent the emptiness in his heart. When the magic power was used up, he sat down to rest and continued to practice after resting enough. Maybe Kyle was in a deeper and more negative mood today, and the practice of the black magic part today seemed to be very effective. Unknowingly, the curfew time had passed. Ignoring that he had violated the school rules, Kyle continued to release magic unscrupulously. At this moment, the door opened, but no one was there. Noticing the abnormality, Kyle quickly stood still, looked around, approached the corner, and looked around cautiously. For a long time, only the open classroom door was shaking in the wind, and there was nothing unusual about the others. However, Kyle did not relax his vigilance, because he clearly remembered that he had locked the door before starting to practice spells. After standing for a long time, he suddenly waved his wand. The dust on the ground around him, and the broken stones that were blown up by practicing magic spells all floated up. Then, as Kyle waved his wand, they flew quickly in the classroom. These little things were not aggressive, but they would not miss any blind spots. Soon, the dust gave feedback and hit an invisible object. Kyle subconsciously cast a spell. The remaining rationality made Kyle not choose the cutting spell or black magic, but chose to petrify everything. Then, Kyle controlled the dust to fly in the direction of the transparent object at any time. Finally, a human figure appeared in the dust. Judging from the figure, it was just a little ghost, but Kyle was not careless. He cast a quick appearance, and the figure did not change at all. This aroused Kyle's interest. It was so easy for Kyle to subdue him. Obviously, the level of the newcomer was limited, but the quick appearance did not work. It seemed that the stranger had a very interesting magic item. Then, Kyle tried several magic spells that he knew that could be revealed, but none of them worked. Even the search magic commonly used in black magic did not work. Suddenly, Kyle's mind moved. Invisibility cloak flies. Sure enough, as the spell took effect, a magical cloak flew over from the opposite side. The person under the invisibility cloak also appeared in front of Kyle. It was Harry Potter. Kyle played with the invisibility cloak with a playful look on his face, just holding it in his hand. This powerful magic equipment did not have any magical aura. No matter how Kyle checked, the performance of this cloak was exactly the same as an ordinary linen cloak, but Kyle's arm dragging the cloak and disappearing reminded Kyle of his extraordinariness. It's a pity that it's not his own, Kyle thought regretfully. He waved his stick again to unlock Kyle's petrification, and without waiting for Potter to say anything, Kyle threw Potter's invisibility cloak to him. After taking the invisibility cloak, Potter, who had been anxious just now, calmed down. Because of the life-saving grace before, although Kyle was the evil Slytherin in Potter's heart, he did not say bad things to him. Chapter 21 A Conversation with Harry. It's not a good habit to hang out after curfew, Mr. Potter. Potter curled his lips at this, but he also heard the ridicule in the words and fought back. Obviously you also hang out after curfew, Mr. Shafiq. Besides, you can call me Harry, my friends all call me that. It's my pleasure. You can also call me Kyle. The savior looked at the traces left by various magic practices in the practice room and clearly showed a hint of envy. After all, how many boys of this age would not pursue powerful magic? Pointing to a cutting mark on the wall with the deepest depth of nearly 30 centimeters, he asked Kyle, Kyle, what kind of magic is this mark left by, and what grade did you learn it in? Kyle looked at Harry deeply. This child is either very cunning and clearly saw something, but still pretending to be ignorant, or he is really ignorant. The mark Harry pointed out was the most normal one among the traces of dark magic in the room. Those corrupted human idols, the fierce fire with controlled burning range, the pale green color, and the obvious toxic liquid were ignored. Of course, considering that the strength of these magics was controlled, only the traces of the cutting curse were the most conspicuous. Perhaps the savior from the Muggle world had not yet had time to load too much magic common sense into his little head, so this could explain it. But no matter what the reason was, Kyle had to look at the savior differently. This spell is not in the textbook. I learned it from a book in the library. If you are interested, you can go and have a look. You probably need to read 2 or 3 basic explanations first, and you will have enough basic knowledge to support you to learn this spell. Well, okay Kyle, thank you for your recommendation. Are you practicing spells? Harry changed the subject abruptly. At this time, Kyle reminded him of his good friend, Hermione Granger. He believed that the two of them would definitely have something in common. Of course, Kyle saw that Harry was stiff, but he didn't say much. Shrugging, he replied, as you can see, Harry, what about you? What did you get from wandering around the castle at night? The young wizards were most enthusiastic about exploring the secret passages in the castle, but these secret passages were not so easy to find. Some passages only appeared during the full moon, and some passages were hidden behind portraits. An occasional night tour was obviously not enough for Harry to find anything. But the magical thing was that Potter actually hesitated. Could it be that this little guy was lucky enough to find a secret passage? This was a great topic of conversation among the young wizards in the lower grades. No, Kyle, I didn't find the secret passage. What was that? A hidden classroom? The school kitchen? According to Kyle, these could all be themes for the young wizards' adventure games. Sir, is there anything that can make you see the past, or make the impossible possible, or, I don't really understand. Anyway, it's something magical. Hearing this, Kyle became more interested, and at the same time, raised a little vigilance. He clenched his wand slightly, and his left leg slightly turned to Harry, which was a posture that was easy to exert force. Magic itself is magical enough, Harry. Magic can do so many things that we can or can't imagine. Can you tell me in detail what you encountered? Obviously, the previous life-saving grace worked. Since it has been opened, Harry decided to talk to Kyle. Just now, when I was hiding from Filch, I entered an abandoned classroom, and I saw a mirror inside. As he said, Harry looked at Kyle with some uneasiness. Kyle didn't say anything, but just motioned Harry to continue the story. Well, I don't know how to describe it. I saw my parents in the mirror. They were right next to me. I wonder if this means something. Will my parents be resurrected in the future, or can this mirror summon the souls of my parents? I know this is incredible, but you also said that magic can do too many things that we can or cannot imagine. Can I use the mirror to bring my parents back, Kyle? Harry's voice was choked with sobs, his eyes were full of hesitation, and he looked at him with a pleading look. Kyle was silent for a while. Harry, with a sad face, looked like an abandoned puppy, which made people reluctant to refuse. However, thinking of some possible situations, Kyle still hardened his heart. I'm afraid not. Harry, can you tell me more about the mirror? Have you tried to communicate with the mirror and ask it directly? No, I didn't think of this. Can the mirror speak? Who knows? Kyle shrugged. Okay, the last few questions. Harry, when was our first conversation? Where? Why did we appear there? As he asked, Kyle no longer concealed himself and raised his wand to point at Harry. Kyle, what are you going to do? Harry was shocked. He thought you were a good person with thick eyebrows and big eyes, but you turned out to be an evil Slytherin. Are you finally unable to resist and want to attack me? Damn Slytherin. Answer me, Harry. Has no one ever told you not to trust magical objects with thoughts, and not to open your heart to magical objects easily? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22 Hope. Answer me, Harry. Has no one ever told you not to trust magical objects with thoughts, and not to open your heart to magical objects easily? Hearing this, Harry's expression eased, and he no longer looked at Kyle with anger. Instead, his expression turned into a question mark. I just looked in the mirror. How can I open my heart to the mirror? Kyle understood Harry's expression without Harry saying anything. Thinking about how he had just suspected that Harry deliberately turned a blind eye to the traces of dark magic in the classroom, he felt an inexplicable guilt towards Harry. It seems that he had wronged Harry. Because Harry was obviously not pretending to be confused, he was really confused. He motioned Harry to lead the way to the classroom, where the mirrors were stored, and explained, Harry, whether it is a magic item with its own thoughts or a magic item that can easily spy on your heart, it is extremely dangerous, because you don't know what they want to do to you. So never trust such magic items, unless you can find where their brains are. Also, Harry, you haven't answered my question just now. Okay Kyle, if you insist. The first conversation was after the Halloween dinner, in the basement women's bathroom. Ron and I went to rescue Hermione, and you seem to be watching the fun. Is it so obvious? Kyle reflected. Don't make fun of Harry, it's obviously the senior who cares about the safety of the junior, and he took action regardless of the positions of different colleges, so as to solve the crisis. Regardless of whether it was obvious or not, Kyle must stand firm, and refute it immediately. Harry smiled and said that I know little common sense in the magic world, but I'm not stupid. Not to mention a little disagreement between the two. Following Harry's guidance, the two stopped. After passing a tall set of armor, Harry pointed to a door nearby. It's here, Kyle, but to be honest, I don't think this is a dangerous mirror. You see, the mirror didn't hurt me, and it even helped me see my parents. Isn't that amazing? This is a very Gryffindor idea, a very, well, naive idea. Even Kyle couldn't easily come up with a suitable and non-aggressive adjective. Anyway, this is not a magical item that should be here. I'm sure that in the past few years at school, I haven't heard of such a magical mirror hidden anywhere in the school. Kyle ignored Harry's words and cautiously looked through the crack in the door into the classroom. Sure enough, he saw a very impressive mirror that reached the ceiling, with a gorgeous golden frame and two claw-shaped feet underneath. After confirming that there was really such a mirror here, and it was not a joke or delusion made by Harry, he signaled Harry to step back. After they were far enough away from the mirror, he raised his wand again. Harry, stand back. It's better to stay far enough away from the mirror before we know if it's dangerous. What are you going to do next, Kyle? Is there any magic that can test this mirror? Although I think this mirror is completely harmless. Harry shrugged, not agreeing with Kyle's actions, but showing great interest in the magic that Kyle was about to use. Imagining the 30 cm deep spell marks in the practice room just now, Kyle could even see Harry's eyes shining. Of course Harry, this spell is magical enough and powerful enough. It is a spell bound to Hogwarts. As long as the little wizard casts this spell in time within the range of Hogwarts, he will be sufficiently protected. Nothing can hurt him. Nothing. This is simply amazing. But how is this possible? The little wizard can't have such powerful magic. How is it impossible? I have already said that this is a spell bound to Hogwarts. Kyle waved his wand. Summon the professor. Ahem. Kyle, are you going to notify the professor? We are on a night tour. Oh my god. Let's run. We can't be caught by the professor. Kyle was a little depressed. Don't worry Harry, compared to a minor violation, the school definitely attaches more importance to the safety of students, and will not allow such an unknown magical item to appear in Hogwarts. After all, you just use the magic mirror. It is better to let the professor check it out, and I just used a communication magic. The person who receives the signal can learn from the spell who is contacting him. Hearing this, Harry gave up resistance. Now he wanted to beat himself up. Why did he tell the news to a cowarded Slytherin? He had to go to the professor for such a trivial matter? How did he survive in Slytherin until today? If he was in Gryffindor, he would be despised to death. But he actually had so many friends in Slytherin, which was incredible. Harry didn't say anything, but Kyle read his thoughts again from Harry's expression of despair. Kyle didn't say anything, and regretted that he couldn't send Harry a smiling expression. Okay Kyle, who did you send your magic signal to? All the professors? Harry looked helpless, and asked Kyle weakly. Of course not, this magic can only be used one-on-one. But don't worry, I have notified Ardeen. Pretending not to see Harry's horrified expression, Kyle said happily. W and caret the @%*k. Because Harry's language is not very civilized, the author manually censored it. No longer paying attention to anything Kyle said, Harry turned around and ran away. Don't go yet, Harry, don't go yet. Harry, an inexplicable voice sounded behind Kyle and said the same words as Kyle. Kyle was so shocked that he almost jumped up. Armor protection shattered into pieces without thinking. He put on the armor protection for himself and dodged the possible attack to the left and returned a cutting spell to fly towards the place where the sound came from. The whole action was done in one go, and it looked full of elegance. Obviously, both the spell and the dodge had been practiced thousands of times. Kyle even had time to give his reaction a 100. Turning back, Dumbledore was standing behind Kyle with a smile. Kyle stood up, as if nothing had happened, patted the dust on his body because of the rolling force, looked up at the sky, and said he didn't want to talk. Harry also walked back a little embarrassed at this time. After all, it was not a good experience to be caught by the principal for a legal night outing. But the smile on the corner of his mouth could not be concealed. Good evening, Professor. Good evening, gentlemen. Hello, Professor. Since you are here, Harry is obviously not in any danger. Let Harry explain what happened to you. I just notified Professor Snape to come over. Now it seems that I have to go to him to explain. Kyle originally wanted to find an excuse to leave, and Kyle didn't need to get involved in the next matter. Don't worry, Mr. Kyle, I just saw the magic signal you sent out. I'm sorry that I listened to some of your conversation without permission. Considering that there is no need to disturb Professor Snape's rest, I blocked the magic signal. Hearing this, Kyle narrowed his eyes. Professor Dumbledore, with an unchanged expression, still looked at Kyle and the others with a smile. Chapter 23 Trust no longer exists. Harry was completely unaware of the strange atmosphere between Kyle and Dumbledore. He stood aside with an embarrassed and ashamed look on his face, his eyes wandering, and he never dared to look Dumbledore in the face. He looked extremely ashamed, but this was the normal expression of Gryffindor after being caught violating school rules. Kyle said that he was familiar with this expression, and he could see it dozens or hundreds of times a year. Dumbledore. Professor Dumbledore, we didn't mean to go on a night tour. It was because. Okay Harry, it's vacation now, and nothing can stop the little wizard's desire to explore the castle during the vacation. This is not a big deal, right? Dumbledore interrupted with a smile before Harry finished speaking. Kyle was speechless. When did the school rules become so ignored? He could only say that he was worthy of being the golden boy. So Harry, so you have discovered the magic mirror? Harry didn't pay attention to Dumbledore's question. Hearing that Dumbledore knew about the magic mirror, he asked impatiently. So it's called the magic mirror. Does it belong to you, Professor? Why do I see my parents in the mirror? Does this mean that I will be able to see them one day? Calm down, Harry. Don't let the magic mirror confuse you. Instead of answering Harry's question in a hurry, he turned to look at Kyle. Mr. Shafiq, since you also know about the magic mirror, are you interested in trying the magic of the magic mirror? As he spoke, he walked towards the classroom where the magic mirror was placed. From the moment he entered the classroom, Kyle used the brain blocking spell and never let himself appear in the range of the mirror. After all, Kyle didn't want his inner thoughts to be seen clearly by a mirror. At this time, Harry stood quietly in front of the mirror with a mixture of sadness and happiness on his face and a hint of hope in his sadness. Kyle had never seen so many expressions appear on a person's face at the same time. But thinking about Harry's experience and what he saw in the mirror, it is not difficult to understand Harry's mood at this time. At this time, Kyle already knew the name and origin of this magic mirror. There was a line of words engraved on its top, Iristra luit ubica fruit on vos. This is the famous mirror of Erised. Legend has it that it was forged by a goblin. The words on it are the name of the forger. With a trace of sympathy for Harry, Kyle looked at Dumbledore. No, sir. I think I know clearly what I want, and I don't need to use a false picture in a mirror to comfort myself and satisfy myself. Obviously you have a firm will, Mr. Shafiq. By the way, can I call you Kyle? My pleasure, Professor. The conversation between the two did not disturb Harry at all. At this time, he had already sat down on the floor in front of the mirror. His expression was much calmer. He smiled and looked at the picture in the mirror while constantly wiping his tears. Okay, Harry, don't you want to know what I saw in the mirror? At this time, Professor Dumbledore stood beside Harry. Oh, Professor, I'm sorry I didn't notice you. You didn't appear in the mirror. Is this a magic trick? What did you see? It's my parents too. Look, my dad is greeting you again. I saw myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks. Socks are never enough, right? Dumbledore said. Christmas came and went, and I never received a pair of socks. People insisted on giving me books. Harry's expression became full of question marks again. But Professor. But, my parents are there. This is a magical mirror. It allows us to see only the most pressing and strongest desires in our hearts. You have never seen your family, so you see them standing around you. However, this mirror can neither teach us knowledge nor tell us the truth. People waste their time in front of it, obsessed with what they see, and even tortured by it to go crazy, because they don't know whether everything in the mirror is real or possible. The professor's words obviously scared Harry, but he was reluctant to look away at his parents in the mirror, and the hesitation on his face was clearly visible. Give up, Harry. Don't indulge in falsehood. The effect of this magic mirror is indeed great, and it even reaches the level of the resurrection stone to a certain extent. But fake is fake, and I believe your parents don't want you to indulge in falsehood. Kyle persuaded Harry, but his heart was full of disappointment with the school and Dumbledore. First, the 5x level dangerous magical creature 3-headed dog was placed in the school corridor. Then the 4x level dangerous magical creature troll appeared in the basement, and now even the famous mirror of Erised has appeared in the school. Is this still the so-called oldest and safest Hogwarts? Think about what Dumbledore said to Kyle in the women's bathroom. Of course, Mr. Shafiq, Hogwarts is always the safest. This is just an accident. The professor's experiments ran out. You can live and study in Hogwarts without worry. Thinking about this sentence and looking at the magic mirror in front of him, Kyle felt cold in his heart. If a school in the Muggle world puts a lion in the corridor, then blocks the corridor and marks it as a restricted area, a wolf breaks into the basement, and a computer is placed in an abandoned classroom, which is full of learning materials from Japan, and anyone who finds him can use the computer. In this case, does the principal dare to claim that the school is safe and that people can live and study without worry? The assumptions in this metaphor are countless times lower than the danger level of Hogwarts. Because Professor Snape, who is one of the top 3 in the school's combat power, was bitten on the leg by a 3-headed dog, and Professor Quirrell, as the professor of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, was scared to death by a troll, even if he was pretending. To be honest, Kyle already thinks that the Weasley twins are the right ones. With their character of being keen on breaking the rules, they didn't feed the 3-headed dog or the troll. If this is not the right one, what is it? Such a castle that claims to be the oldest and safest, under the protection of the strongest white wizard of this century, has so many dangerous items. What does the school, or Dumbledore, think of Hogwarts? Is it his own dangerous item storage room? And what was Dumbledore's purpose in doing this? To test the savior? To train the savior? In short, no matter what the purpose was, the great, righteous, and worshipped Dumbledore put all the underage wizards in the school in incredible danger. What did this mean? Was it for the greater good? Kyle sneered inwardly. Chapter 24 Asking for help. Kyle, who was no longer interested in the conversation between Dumbledore and Harry, politely said goodbye to them, and decisively turned around and left the classroom. On the way here, Harry had already introduced Kyle to the origin of the invisibility cloak, his father's relic, which was sent to Harry as a Christmas gift by an unnamed person. You see, what a coincidence. The principal happened to put the mirror of Erised in the school, Harry happened to receive his father's relic, the invisibility cloak, and the principal happened to stand by and watch Harry indulge in the false illusion. If it weren't for Kyle's signal to Snape, I don't know how long Harry would be tested. Kyle, who was not interested in the savior training game, did not contact Harry again during the whole holiday, but just carried out his own research step by step. The income from the toy puppet made Kyle's research temporarily no longer restricted by galleons. The silver big dog provided enough theoretical support and helped Kyle advance the progress bar of the Goldfinger. Kyle would have new gains almost every day. Kyle immersed himself in the research and lived a life of going from the library to the abandoned classroom and the dormitory. It was not until Malfoy with platinum hair appeared in the lounge again that he realized that the vacation was over. A vacation is short, but Kyle still achieved phased results. Wizards have been studying the optimization and miniaturization of the energy storage room for thousands of years, but with little success. The reason is that the accuracy of the magic circle drawing has blocked countless wizards like a mountain. Imagine the difficulty of copying an article on the wall of an entire classroom and the difficulty of copying the same article on the wall of a room model. It's frustrating to think about it. But once this problem is solved, the effect of the energy storage room will increase significantly. However, when magic meets technology, many problems are solved. In fact, the Muggle world has already been at the forefront of the magic world in terms of the engraving of this kind of macro pattern. The magic world still uses traditional methods. All magic rune masters and alchemy masters know that the more magic runes per unit area, the stronger the effect of the magic circle, but the accuracy that the eyes can distinguish and the stability of magic power have limited the limit that humans can achieve. The Muggle world has already broken through the limits of human beings. The photolithography machine and the etching machine have reached the accuracy of several hundred nanometers even in the 1990s, not to mention the 21st century in the previous life, which has reached the level of several nanometers. Kyle's goal is to make a portable energy storage core that can be carried with him, and to ensure that the effect of the energy storage core does not decrease too much. Kyle's initial idea at present is to design a sufficiently powerful magic circle without considering the difficulty of engraving, and then use the industrial means of the Muggle world to engrave the magic circle on a plate made of magic-averse metal as the main material, and hollow out part of the magic circle. When using it, put the mold where the magic circle needs to be engraved, and the mental power flows in the pattern engraved by the mold, and finally leaves a complete magic circle. The benefits of this are obvious. The artist no longer needs to consider the structure of the magic circle when drawing, and can draw along the pattern in the mold with one heart. At the same time, the hollow channel composed of magic-averse metal can bind the magic power in the channel, and will not cause the magic power to escape. The existence of the hollow channel not only solves the problem of accuracy, but also greatly reduces the requirements for the ability to manipulate magic power, and solves the problem of magic stability in a different direction. This is like the comparison between a slide and ice skating. When sliding, you can only slide down a specific track, which is not free enough, but safe and stable enough. When skating, you are unrestrained and can gallop anywhere on the ice surface. But if you want to move along a specific track on the ice surface, the difficulty suddenly increases. The problem of thinking has been solved, and the remaining thing is to design a sufficiently powerful magic circle. Because as the size of the magic circle decreases, the magic materials used in the production process will inevitably decrease. At the same time, during use, the too fine magic channel will also limit the maximum possible strength of magic power to a lower level, which requires the newly designed magic circle to be able to play a more powerful effect with a lower configuration. At the same time, the pigments used to depict the magic circle should be improved to make it more conductive to magic power, which can also reduce the impact caused by the too fine magic channel. Kyle spent the entire Christmas holiday painting and modifying the magic circle. Thanks to the continuous research of wizards on energy storage chambers for thousands of years, Kyle has a large amount of information for reference. The most important part of Kyle is not the examples that have been successfully used, but the various wonderful designs created by wizards over the past 1,000 years. Because among these plans that have been proven to be unfeasible, there are many cases that have been abandoned because of the difficulty of drawing. These plans that were once rejected because they were too impractical were casually recorded in essays or autobiographies and were not taken seriously, but Kyle regarded them as treasures. The brain holes opened by wizards over the years are enough for Kyle to design a sufficiently powerful magic circle. Compared with the huge workload of the magic circle, a Christmas holiday seems too short, so that on the first day of school, Kyle ran to the library as soon as the class was over. In the eyes of his classmates who looked at him as a pervert, the disturbances in the outside world did not disturb Kyle, but sometimes fate is so wonderful. Before the first Quidditch game after Christmas, Kyle actually met Harry and his two friends in the library and intersected with the main plot of the story here. Hermione Granger, a little girl Kyle often saw in the library, is an absolute academic bully. A first-year freshman can endure loneliness, and so can the library, to read a large magic book, which is enough to show her excellence, and the other two little ghosts are rare guests in the library. The three little brats gathered together, discussing something in a low voice, and looked at Madam Pince nervously from time to time. Obviously, they knew that talking in the library would not please Madam Pince. From the occasional words of several people, it was obvious that the little girl was accusing the two of not working hard. This small circle seemed to be looking for some information, but they couldn't find it. After trying for a long time, it seemed that the little girl arranged for Harry and Little Red Hair to stay in the library to look for information during the Christmas holiday, but they didn't expect that they were playing wizard chess so much that they had forgotten the little girl's arrangement. What's the use of playing wizard chess? Can playing wizard chess improve your grades? Can playing wizard chess help you avoid danger? Can playing wizard chess help us solve problems? You just want to play, and I'm the only one looking for information, and you don't care about anything. The little girl's voice was already crying. Harry and Little Red Hair both lowered their heads and didn't speak, and Little Red Hair still had a look of dissatisfaction on his face. To be honest, it felt like an old mother teaching her son a lesson. Chapter 25 Asking for help. The little girl raised her voice unconsciously in excitement, which was obviously beyond the tolerance of Madam Pince. Before Granger finished speaking, Madam Pince had already come over and knocked on their long table angrily. The library is a place for reading. If you want to quarrel, please go out and don't disturb others here. Madam Pince's harsh words made the two boys bury their heads even lower, and also made Granger notice his own loss of composure. After whispering an apology to Madam Pince in embarrassment, the little witch ignored Harry and Little Red Hair and turned the book with a little irritation. Seeing this, Harry and Little Red Hair had no choice but to accompany Granger to search together. However, compared with the little witch's dedication, the two little boys were like nails placed on the chair, twisting and turning very unsteadily. Seeing that there was no excitement to watch, Kyle no longer paid much attention and continued to quietly flip through his own materials. Unfortunately, after only half an hour, Kyle went from being a spectator to a participant. Frowning at the three people standing in front of him, Kyle greeted them helplessly. "Good afternoon, Miss Granger, Harry, Mr. Weasley. Do you have any questions?" Granger glared at Harry angrily, but said nothing. On the contrary, the red-haired Weasley, with a vigilant look on his face, kept pulling Harry to stop him from speaking. "Harry, how can you trust an evil Slytherin? Who knows if he is in the same group with? Even if they are not in the same group, what if he leaks the secret? This is not a good idea. This is simply incredible. Little Red Riding Hood can actually look serious and say such brainless words righteously. Mr. Red, I have to remind you that I didn't ask you to come here. Your accusation against Slytherin is too outrageous. Slytherin has been established for thousands of years. Countless Slytherins who are famous and have made contributions in the magic world have become evil and untrustworthy in your mouth. Your ridiculous remarks are really disgusting." After that, he ignored the red-faced and angry redhead. To be honest, Kyle really couldn't think of anything to be angry about. Ignorance, paranoia, blindly following others, brainlessness, combined with the rumors Kyle heard about the redhead, and the fact that he had great ambitions but little talent. How could such a person have the right to be angry about his own incompetence? Okay, Weasley, here stands a savior, a hard-working, intelligent and very cute top-grade student, and the prefect of Slytherin. What about you? Who do you think you are? What qualifications do you have to speak? Please get out of the way. Kyle's words had become merciless, but the red-haired man obviously couldn't find any words to refute, so he could only grit his teeth and weakly repeat, "You are an evil Slytherin." After several encounters with this red-haired man, Kyle had a very bad impression. It is true that he is loyal to his friends and can be brave for his friends, but it is obviously far from being flawless. Harry looked at Kyle in embarrassment and kept comforting his friend. Obviously, Harry came with doubts, but he didn't continue to speak at this time. Instead, the little witch stood up. "Can I call you Kyle, sir? Thank you for saving us on Halloween before. In addition, I apologize to you for Ron's unreasonableness. You can also call me Hermione." Granger's words obviously made the red-haired Weasley even more angry, and he even drew out his wand. If Weasley could have cast a spell at Kyle without caring about anything, Kyle would have looked up to Weasley, but unfortunately he was stopped by Harry again. "My pleasure, Miss Hermione. I noticed that you had some arguments just now. Did something happen?" Obviously, some things cannot be avoided just by wanting to, so it is better to take the initiative to face them. Hearing Kyle's words, Weasley shouted about eavesdropping again, having bad intentions or something like that, but Kyle completely ignored him and looked straight at Granger. "Yes, Mr. Kyle, we are looking for a man named Nicholas Flamel. Do you know him?" Hearing this name, Kyle's face looked a little strange. He has completely confirmed that the plot of the first storybook has begun, because Nicholas Flamel is the creator of the Philosopher's Stone. "I didn't expect that I would become the promoter of the plot," Kyle thought helplessly. "Of course, Miss Hermione. Nicholas Flamel is the only known creator of the Philosopher's Stone. He celebrated his 665th birthday last year, and now lives in seclusion in Devon with his wife. This is some brief information I know about Nicholas Flamel. If you want to see more detailed information, Introduction to Alchemy Masters and Great Wizards of the Millennium can help you." Kyle said so, but this slightly simple information obviously gave Granger enough hints. After hurriedly thanking Kyle, he took Harry and Weasley, who looked confused, and ran out. Both from the Muggle world, the little witch was obviously much better than Harry. Time passed quickly, and soon another month passed. It was already mid-February. Kyle's first version of the plan had been completed, and he was constantly trying and making mistakes alone, and adding some new ideas and new attempts from time to time. All the work had to be done by himself, and Kyle didn't even dare to discuss it with the professor. After all, whether it was the current energy storage core or the energy storage room of the floating city in the future, it was extremely important to Kyle, and it was never too careful. Maybe in the future, he will meet like-minded people, or after being protected by a magic agreement, Kyle will open this part of the research to others, but obviously not now. The magic circle designed by Kyle now can almost be used in portable energy storage rooms. Even the floating city in the future will have the same general idea as the current magic circle, so Kyle will not let it spread easily. The completion of the research work in stages made Kyle very happy, and he even had the mood to listen to the little snakes chatting about all kinds of gossip in the lounge. For example, 30 in the second year of Ravenclaw fell in love with 30 in the third year, and 30 in the third year had a crush on 30 in Gryffindor, and 30 in Gryffindor liked 30 in Hufflepuff, but 30 in Hufflepuff had a special liking for 30 in Slytherin. This kind of information is extremely boring, not even as interesting as an independent rune and the magic circle. Kyle said that he couldn't listen to these at all, and he didn't hear that 30 in Hufflepuff had a mole on her thigh. However, among these boring information that Kyle didn't care about, there was a very interesting news. The two brothers of the Savior seem to like Professor Quirrell of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Every time the Savior meets Quirrell on the road, he will give him a sunny smile. The red-haired Weasley also began to persuade people not to laugh at Quirrell's stuttering. It seems that the three protagonists have eliminated the threat of Quirrell, Kyle thought, although the Savior is unreliable and Weasley has a strange way of thinking. After all, they have the little witch Granger to give them tactical guidance, so their thinking should not be deviated. Kyle touched his chin and felt that he had gained a lot today. Not only did he hear the big, "Oh no," the Savior's new movements, but he also read some information through Harry's actions. The lounge is really a good place. Everyone here is talented, speaks well, and can provide information that he doesn't pay attention to at ordinary times. This makes Kyle decide to come to the lounge more often when he is free in the future. PS1. New books are not easy, and they are collected and cherished. PS2. Thank you for Weeking's recommendation votes, which are voted every day. Thank you very much. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.